Right, this is going to be another episode of Snake and Banter with me and Maui, because I'm actually not only from England, speak English, but also know how to read. So unlike the rest of you out there, I don't go Maui and I when it's totally incorrect, because actually I know the basic rules of the language I speak. Shout out Americans. So okay, guest for this episode is going to be Mnmzzz, but who, to be fair, has requested we just call him Jeff, because he's got that thing where you're still in that phase that Richard Lewis went through a long time ago, right? Where he got rid of his alias, and his whole thing, right, Mnmzzz, was he used to just say like, well, you know, it's a bit childish, isn't it? It's a bit immature, you know, we pick it when you're a kid, but like I'm an adult now, you know, I've got like professional work. But I always used to tell him as a counter though, I would say this, yeah, but here's the difference. When people on the internet go, that Thorin's a dickhead, I go, fair enough, it's not me, is it? It's the name I picked. If they actually say my birth name, that might hurt my feelings. That's who I actually am, you know. So you want to get rid of the name? Should we just call you Jeff in general?
No, I mean, it's like tough because on one hand, everyone knows me as that.
Right.
And they're like, if I see that combination of letters on screen, I know it's him. But people will walk up to me and, in person, they'll be like, oh, are you the guy with the fucking Z's in your name or whatever? Okay. Or you're the guy with the dog. It's actually the dog picture on Twitter. Okay. From Silent Hill, because it's like no one knows how to pronounce. You know, there's no vowels in there. You can't really work it in any particular way. But you seem to have got it from the first try, so good on you. Yeah. You know, yeah,
it's all good. No, but if people don't know, Mnmzzz Jeff works as a senior editor for Dust2 US, which, just in case people get confused, the reason why the overlay looks quite like HLTV.org is it's essentially like a US vertical, that dreaded term, of HLTV.org, but as to be a specific scene site for the US. And so he works over there with some people that are cool, some people are massive dickheads, but you know what? That's not what this show's all about, is it? That's, tell you what, I'll always keep it real, motherfuckers. So, okay, let's start out. Mnmzzz, Jeff, we always make the guests start with the first one. So what is your good point for Snake and Banter?
Yeah, well, first things, I know I hate that Gonzalo guy too, that junior writer who only just works hard. Hate him. No one else at Dust CS. Everyone else is perfect, right?
Okay.
So I'm going to jump right into my first good point. I think for my good point, I really want to focus on Liquid's upcoming roster moves. I think we can safely say, you know, the Cadian Skulls, Ykinder, Naf, and Twist.
As far as I know, that move is all going to happen. It's like behind the scenes, it's just waiting until it's announced.
It's just a statement of fact at this point. Yeah, and I think the main angle that I appreciate this move from is it's almost like Liquid are recognizing the classic problems they've had on their team probably since the very beginning of, we've never had a tier 1 opper. And, you know, you can say Cadian's not like a star opper, but he's probably the best opper they've ever had, without a doubt. And two, outside of Nitro during his prime before he left Avowed for the first time, they've never really had an IGL who, you know, can deliver on a tier 1 caliber. So, and you kind of have to wonder to what degree bring Zeus back in has to do with that, in the sense that, outside of NAF, he's the only one in that roster who's, aware of sort of the long-term problems Liquid has. And I'd love to know, how involved he was in the process of getting that team set up.
Okay, go on then, Maui. Hit me with it. Because in theory, we've only like briefly touched on this tangentially. We've never actually talked about what you think of the whole roster.
I think it's a definite upgrade than what they were using before, and I'm glad to see that they're keeping 3 people from the Americas region in NAF, Twist, and Skulls, so that they'll actually just cakewalk through the Americas RMR, because that's going to make things a lot easier for them, and it'll make a move in Skulls, which I don't actually think will make them necessarily world beaters, still financially viable. And that's really the biggest thing I draw into question with this move, is that I think that people are a little bit overhyped and oversold on Skulls because of his numbers, but a lot of his numbers are in domestic competitions against Tier 2 Brazil is really not that strong, if we're being honest. And so if you actually look back at his demos, he does a lot of things that are pretty shaky, and I don't think that he even sometimes has good fundamentals, but his aim is a lot better than people that are in Brazil, so he ends up just farming them a lot of the time. But I'll say that on the positive side of this, one is that I'm glad that Ykinder's experiment as an in-game leader has ended, and I'm glad that it's going to be Cadian, because now you have, in my eyes, one of the top 3 in-game leaders in the world now playing for Liquid. And two, like you're saying with Cadian, the fact that they're going to have a real tier 1 opper, because I wouldn't necessarily have included Cadian my S tier of oppers. Like, he's not of the Monacy, Shiro caliber, or Zywoo, obviously, but I would put him in the A tier pretty safely. Like, he doesn't necessarily have the mechanics of some of those younger stars, but in terms of setting himself up, making sure that he's going to have a lot of impact with the most expensive weapon in the game, that's what Cadian's been doing for his entire career, and it's going to give Liquid an entirely new look for their defense, which has been so frequently predicated on riflers finding initiatives, taking some kind of space, and now they have another trick up their sleeve. And when it's Cadian calling on top of that, you know he's going to be calling his own number more times than OC was allowed to or even able to.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say on this move, I actually talked about it a bit on Counterpoints if people don't know. Like, me and Maniac just speculated if this lineup that everyone's heard reported would happen, what it would be like. And so, to briefly summarise, basically, the reason I actually think it's a great move is kind of similar to what Jeff is saying here, which is basically, in the history of Liquid, except for when they had Simple, and actually people don't know this, but Simple himself essentially wasn't even the primary AWP some of the time. Like, it was either like Edren or JDM. He used to just, he's Simple, so he would just take it and do what he wanted. So, he's actually sort of like Zywoo now, rifled half the time. So generally, they've never worked around like a true primary AWP. I mean, obviously they tried to do it when they had JDM, when they had the Stanislaw lineup and then Nitro, but it just didn't work. Like, I think JDM's form wasn't that great. And as a team, they just clearly haven't got like the wherewithal of how you play around an AWP. So I actually think low key, it's sort of a genius solve that you already needed an IGL anyway. So you get an IGL who's sort of not even a primary AWP himself really, and he just is going to do the role. And so to me, the reason why this is a great move is because if that part works, it's actually a better version of what you had with Nitro. You've just got like Liquid 2.0 from 2019. Also, you've brought back Twists potentially. So if he can get back in a great form, you've got a very strong rifle core. And so to me, the Skulls one basically is a pure gamble. But also, if that doesn't work out, you can get in a lot of players to do that, just be an aggressive rifler. Like, there's plenty of players in the scene. That's probably actually, the irony is even the Brazilian scene is filled with players who do that role right now. So I actually think there's a lot of gambles, like things have to work, like Yukinda has to work going back into his role, Twist has to like find his place in the team, Cadian has to obviously call with a non-Danish. There's a bunch of question marks, but I don't think they're implausible, each of them, that they can go. The Skulls one's the only one, like you, Maui, I'm sort of reserving a bit of, I'm waiting to see what happens with that one, but I actually don't think that even has to work. Like, it doesn't even have to be an 8 out of 10 move. Like, the rest of the team could well be good enough that this immediately can be like a top 4, top 3 team in the world. And actually, when I look at the pieces, if this actually works, if all the gambles work, this lineup be fucking mega. This could actually be number 1 in my opinion.
The true insanity of it is the fact that, you know, you're getting someone like Twist, who at this point, I don't really consider him an NA player anymore. You have someone who's worked under Kerrigan for years now, has the intelligence of it. He can bring it back to NAF. He can bring it back to Skulls. It's another, you know, It's another English speaker. So you have a good balance of sort of the culture of the team. And the Zeus angle is, I think, really the most underrated part.
Sure.
He's been out in the wasteland of the Brazilian like tier 2, tier 3 scene for so long now, and to have him actually, you know, healthy again and being able to travel and being able to do, you know, tier 1 work again, it's probably the, you know, best coach. I think, you know, he's the best coach they've ever had, and it's underrated for him to finally, like, the Fluxo move was a complete non-starter. That team, I don't know what they're doing. It's almost like the 0-0 Nation of 2021,
Sure.
where every time they add a player, you're like, hey, that's like a 6 or 7 or an 8 out of 10 move. Team loses to, you know, like a tier 4 like Russian stack, or loses to like a Brazilian team back home you've never heard of. Even though they have, you know, Malbs, they have Phelps, they have Fur, they have all these great names, but, you know, beyond that, it's almost like the Liquid roster has now reverted to a stage where if they finally got rid of Elige, you know, in his earlier days, and they kind of, in the sort of Twist, in the Twist Elige schism, if they went with Twist, we can almost see that play out now. Almost Skulls is like a replacement for, I don't know, like a Taco-esque player.
Sure. By the way, on the Zeus angle, I can tell you a couple of brief things. One is that the reason why I also love that they got Zeus back, but then also allowed him to be involved with this roster creation. As far as I know, he was the guy who sort of like made a list of players, and they went out and saw who they could get, and they've gotten quite a few of the top ones as well. Is because I know that I know this guy quite well. I know he actually, a lot of people don't know this detail, right? People think because Stewie2K's image is so big that at the end of the 2018 lineup in Liquid, that they kicked Taco, and Zeus, and then they brought back Adren, and then in came Stu. That's not what happened at all. It was the other way around. What happened was, believe it or not, Taco and Zeus got lured with one of those fallen fucking utopian stories of like, let's make MIPR again. And then they went and did that team. And then in doing so, Stewie 2K was just available. So they sent him the other way. And then Adren was their old coach and he came back in. Now it happened they had all that success in 2018. So everyone forgets it and rewrites the story the wrong way around. But the reason I say that is because I know that Zeus actually regrets that when he saw what they both did in 2019 and what he was unable to do because the MIPR team was on its last legs, the joke I always made was, that was the bloody last stand. You don't get 2 or 3 of them, you fucking greedy cunt. Like, you already had one where you wasted hundreds of thousands of dollars of someone's fucking payroll and never did anything of value. So the sad thing is, I know he wishes he could go back in time and go, by the way, so does Taco, and just be like, why don't we just stay in this team? Because the joke is like, what could we have done when Astralis got weaker and took time? You know, they all think that now, mate. So I also think just a great last chance to do it again, you know, like and he's even got some of his pieces, he's got twist back. Then the last thing is, I'm waiting for this lineup. Once this lineup is officially announced, this is also how I know these leakers know nothing, because they don't even get the straight fire ones. I've got a player who could have been in this lineup, but some drama happened. But I have to wait till the lineup gets announced because it's safe. I can't do anything now when it could potentially still fuck up the things behind the scenes. I try not to do that in general, unless I just really don't like your team, but it's not about Astralis now, is it? So don't worry about that.
One other detail. This is like it's kind of a tangent, but it's a slight on the Stewie reputation. There is I mean, it wasn't perpetuated by Stewie because even Liquid wanted Tarek from MIBR.
That's true. Yeah, that's also
true. They first wanted Tarek, and then kind of after the interview and some practices or whatever, that's when they decided, okay, maybe Stewie's actually the better fit for us. Which is to them, they have to be pretty thankful about that move because of what came after with the Grand Slam.
Like, you have to understand that whole thing is basically one of Launder's classic points, if people don't know, where he did for real when Stewie 2K won that Grand Slam, did go, but wait a minute, a major plus a Grand Slam, he must be the greatest of all time. That is like so all I'll say is this, one of the reasons why I only lightly barb with Launders, because he reminds me of DDK. He's brilliant in so many areas, and then the other areas it's like, he's a bit special, isn't he? You know what? Get him a fucking cup of cocoa. The adults are talking now. You don't go too hard at people like that. You know, once you realise what they're about, you know, it's just being mean at that point in time. Yeah, you don't ask the little kid, basically, why is the adult bigger than the house? You just go, oh, brilliant, I'll put that on the fridge. Well done, Launders. Tell us some more shit about jumping around the maps or whatever. By the way, just as an aside, if people don't know as well, this is how shameless Launders is. He himself even said this on Twitter. I told people this on this show a few episodes back, Maui, and this is so insanely shameless. The reason he actually told all of us, lectured us, not to complain about Valve, he even said this, is because some like secret connect in the KZ community had gotten some like feedback back to Valve, and Valve had apparently fixed it, but without ever putting anything out in like an update list. And then as a result, because like this is how shameless Launders is, so he was thinking, wait, I've got the direct connect. Everyone, stop complaining about Valve. They're doing their best, all right. Then a few months, literally like a month later, now he's just like, fuck Valve. They're not changing any of the stuff I like. It's like, but is this just all about you? What the fuck, bro? Like, either hate on Valve, do it, or just wait for the game. Like, what is this shit? Like, that's like some spurned lover shit. What the fuck?
Well,
also,
like,
go on, jump in.
I'm pretty bullish on Valve and CS2, but the fact that he's like it's a positive that they're gaslighting us by changing shit without telling us.
That's like good. That was the first thing I thought. Exactly. Like, bro, can they just tell us when they fix stuff then? Instead, they're doing some mad shit like, you should know what I fixed though. You obviously don't care enough about this relationship that you don't understand what I think. Oh, you haven't seen what I'm doing with my hair? Like, why is Valve my mad girlfriend from about 20 years ago? Right, all right, let's go move on, though. We can't spend too much time on this one.
The pro player, wait, hold on. So the pro player, because the pro players and the Reddit, maybe the Redditors more so, you know, they look at like their net graph and they have like 0.3% loss, and the next day they have like 0.2% loss, and they're like, see, they're changing shit without telling me. They're like, and they write like 8,000 words on Reddit and it gets like 3 upvotes, and it's like, oh, you forgot to take your medicine this morning. Okay, you go. But so going back to, you know, the Liquid roster and the Zeus edition, it's in, you know, like the Launder thing, it's like the same shit with Dupree. It's like, but he won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 majors. That's more than 4 majors. Therefore, he's the GOAT. And it's like, no, that's not how that works. You know, it's a team of 5 players. But there's like almost like this weird almost revisionism about Liquid's history in 2018 where people don't really rate that roster, I think, as high as they should, the one with Taco, because they didn't win all the trophies. But the thing people don't really remember is, you know, who else was a good team in 2018? You might remember them, the, you know, god-conquering 2-major Astralis team that won every single trophy of note almost that year. And you know who came in second place at every single event that year? Liquid. So if we're going to say that Astralis team was the best in the world, the team that almost won every trophy that year should be the second best team in the world. But people are like, oh yeah, they were so right to get rid of Taco and add Stewie because they won the Intel Grand Slam in 93 days or whatever. But ultimately, that's very like simplistic of they didn't win and now they're winning. At the same time, it coincides with Astralis falling off, and it's like the supportive element of Taco on that team was absolutely gangbusters. And I think, if we saw Stewie sort of start falling off the rails eventually, I don't think you would have had that weird decline with Taco. And like you said, he should definitely regret having gone to MIPR because that team didn't do anything of note. I think they maybe won like a Counter-Strike Asian Championship over like Kingwin or something with Taz. But other than that, there was nothing cooking there from the team, and it's just kind of ridiculous. And so this new move that's being touted, it's probably the best they can honestly get if they wanted to come back to NA, because I think they had to internally realize that the fans did not like the team with Rainwalker and Patsy. The results weren't there, and the challenge of getting through the European RMR, they would have not made it through the European RMR with that roster. There was like a 0% chance that team was Yakinder could not stay as the IGL. Patsy, wasn't delivering on the way I think he was, and Rainwalker wasn't delivering, and some stuff in the background. You can't say it out loud, say the quiet part loud, but ultimately, as a good sort of a wrap up, good point for my end, this team should ultimately, hopefully be a team that can surpass complexity and maybe bring some attention, back to NA overall instead of just being the complexity show all the time.
By the way, if people don't know, when Richard Lewis did that feature, that time travel LAN, the thing is, it was his feature, so he actually decided the teams that were in it, and then like people were allowed a bit of pushback. I actually personally tried to get that 2018 Liquid one like way into it and then high up, but the problem is basically he valued like anyone who won a major, basically. So like I even said that they're better than the Cloud9 that won the major. Like, you just look at the results, like they should be on this. But whatever. The thing is, if you know how that feature worked, they were never going to get to like the top 4 at the end anyway. It was going to be the names you knew anyway, like fucking Navi and Fnatic and Astralis. So it was whatever. But I also agree. I think actually just the fact they didn't win is actually whack, because what people don't understand is if you also agree that Astralis is the most goated team ever, then that means on paper they might have just won everything if that team wasn't there. I mean, the joke is if Astralis was like 5% worse, they might have split the fucking finals. Who knows? You can't really know that.
One thing that's going to be lost into the annals of history, but I always found hilarious in Twitch chat, was this most recent iteration of Liquid, where his name's obviously Rainwaker, and people would just type rainwater like that's some kind of insult. But people, when he does badly, people would just type rainwater, and I don't even know how that's supposed to be like a diss. But
well, the joke is, you might not know this, but in some places in your country, the United States of America, it's illegal to collect rainwater. And you know what? After how Liquid played, maybe there's some logic to how your judicial system operates over there. Straight fire. Right.
All right.
Let's move on. Come on.
Yeah, let me get to my good.
The joke is this should just be Kassad's good if he was on the show. So go on. What is it?
That's true. Yeah. I mean, mine is straightforward. It's been the biggest news of the last week. It's just the fact that NiKo is staying with G2. I think the word was he took a U-turn from the Falcons deal, and there's a couple different reasons that I actually really do like this. The first and foremost, and I think this is the most obvious in the fan reaction, is just that cool, like G2 is going to continue with NiKo. They're going to have that continuity moving forward, that all of the fans of G2 can continue supporting their team, knowing that the Star Rifler is going to stay on that team. And frankly, I like when teams are able to just keep progressing with a similar lineup and don't have to make major roster changes because they're getting poached apart by, XYZ org that's coming into the space. I think that just makes for a better narrative overall. I think that it's easier to sell that kind of story in the future. Even if there is a super team Falcons that starts winning a lot of stuff, it's a little bit harder to sell them when the whole story of the team is just like they bought everybody. Whereas G2, in some way, we saw the trials and tribulations of NiKo, the ups and downs, and so for him to hopefully possibly win a major eventually, that would be the crowning achievement and the light at the end of this super long G2 tunnel. The other thing that I like about this is that it finally feels like, for some of the rumors that have surrounded this move, that NiKo shopped himself. And I think that's something in terms of player empowerment that hasn't really come into this space as much as it should have. Whereas in spaces like traditional sports, at least in America, players will have their agents look for deals across the board. They're going to try to test the market to see what's the best fit and what's the best in terms of pay. And so frequently we'll hear about behind the scenes, these rumblings of a player who just immediately signs back with the team that they were already playing with. And I'm looking at people kind of like Device, kind of like Blame F, who just extend their contracts with Astralis without even shopping themselves, because they usually have that line eventually that's like, well, I was going to sign with this team anyways, so why not just get it over with, not have to deal with the anxiety of shopping myself because I wanted to play for Astralis or whatever team it is anyways. But NiKo seemingly took it into his own hands and maybe probably his agent too, to shop himself to a huge buyer in Falcons and then go back to G2, say, hey, this is how much Falcons are offering me right now. I do like playing with you guys. I'll let you guys match this, or maybe even pay some percentage of that salary. And then that deal happened. And I just think, like, this is what we've been talking about in terms of taking traditional sport contract negotiations to this space, and a player finally wisening up to actually get the most bang for their buck in terms of getting paid.
What do you think, Mnmzzz?
It's so great, like you said, that a player is just not being a rube anymore. Players are starting to wise up and not be complete rubes anymore. I think the worst story ever in terms of players not being smart with their, transfers is, consider the following. Remember Abel J? His contract with Furia would, in theory, still be going today. You know how long he's been out of Furia for? Almost 4 years now. And we still see players to this day doing that. We see, players signing 5-year contract extensions on Big, signing 5-year contract extensions on Astralis, doing all of this. They're doing themselves no favors. They're signing, contracts right as CS2 is coming out. The scene still potentially has room to grow if the game keeps picking up more viewers. We move out of the esports winter. Every player should be shopping themselves around right now. And I think, NiKo, it doesn't matter if he has faith in G2. There's no reason he shouldn't have faith in G2 to keep, delivering results. I think, we've gone past the part where it's like, Hooxie's still a greatly flawed player, but they've won enough trophies where it's like, okay, but the ring's on the finger, right? It's, you can say, he's 0-0 and 7 for the first 7 rounds of the game, but the trophies don't lie. And I think there's really no guarantee from NiKo's perspective when he goes and shops himself to Falcons what kind of roster they're going to get. We've heard so many conflicting rumors of players they're going to look at, and I wonder if that's something that sort of chased him away and was like, I'd rather, go back to G2, get a slight bump in salary and have the stability of a roster I know, than potentially go to Falcons and have it be, a lemon team where NiKo's trapped, on like a 2-year contract with potentially, bums, or a roster that's just a mishmash.
Let me think. There's so many angles on this. Like, first of all, on the one you're talking about more abstractly of like shopping yourself, it's actually something I've talked about many times before, so I won't belabor the point. But essentially, the gist goes, I've done a whole skit before where it's sort of like you say to the player, like, oh, you heard your contract's coming up, so make sure you test the market and talk to all the other teams. And they go, no, it's okay, I want to stay on this team. And people know how this one goes, so I'll speed it up. And then you go like, well, yeah, brother, you can stay, but just find out what they're going to offer though, and then you can maybe use that to change your offer. No, but the thing is, I don't want to leave though. No, don't worry about that. You'll still have your chance to join though. And then they go, yeah, but if I go and talk to the other teams, they might think I want to leave though. No, but actually them thinking you want to leave could help though, couldn't it, in negotiations? And then they go, no, but then they might not want me to stay. And you go, fucking hell, yes! If you are a player in demand, you have the leverage. Like, understand that. And if you do it properly, by the way, and professionally, there's nothing wrong with this. This isn't something like scandalous or disloyal that you're doing. Because, like, for example, in this case, NiKo's team, G2, the joke is, if people don't know, notice the one entity that isn't complaining right now about the Saudis are the other teams not owned by the Saudis. That's weird, Mnmzzz, because you'd think they should be complaining. These people are coming in with all this money and all these other sources of money, potentially through sponsors that might not be real if you know about how the Premier League works in England. Essentially, they should all be complaining, dude. They should all be getting together and going, hey, these guys are going to ruin the space. I'll tell you why they aren't doing that. For the same reason Premier League teams don't complain about that. Because if they want to overpay for your star player, then you want to sell him because they're overpaying for him. So what they do is, if they want to pay twice as much as NiKo's worth, you want to sell NiKo, even though he's NiKo, because you get twice the value, and then you can then go and buy like someone comparable to NiKo for less than twice as much. And so eventually, like, basically, that's why in the Premier League they're happy for these players to go, because actually the joke is, it actually is a way to like offset how fucked up your budget is and how crazy your salaries are out of control. So in a weird way, actually, the scene, most orgs would be fine if you're talking. And then I'd also just throw in there as well, the real problem in this situation, though, is that most players don't do that, like we're saying. They just decide either I want to leave, in which case, by the way, they're stupid enough to even tell their team, by the way, I'm probably going to leave now, I'm going to talk to this other team so they don't even get the best deal. Or they want to stay, but they just won't actually like get their own salary up. So in this particular case, it's a really good one, because even though everyone's in economic dire straits right now, NiKo basically has almost max value of any player in the world, and for G2 especially, they can't replace him. So unless they do the massive buyout, the second best option is re-sign him for potentially more money. Or this is the one part where I'm going to spin it, where it's not a total good one for me. Like, I like the idea he got a good deal for himself. I actually think this move's dog shit. Like, one, this move implies all NiKo cared about was money. Like, I notice Huxley isn't the one getting benched. So that implies NiKo's fine just playing the rest of the years with fucking Huxley. Because here's the problem. If we're going to speculate about Falcons, based on what I heard, it's not just Zonic. It's Zonic and let's just say whoever the IGL ends up being. They're the ones picking the team. So spoiler, until the IGL is certain, the rest of the team isn't necessarily certain as far as I know. So even though those names, it's like the Liquid one, are all legit, it's not like the Liquid one where they were definitely all going to sign as far as I knew. That's why I do take umbrage with someone saying that a player is going to sign, because a lot of these names have been heard behind the scenes from very legit sources for months now, over a month at least. I remember weeks ago being somewhere and hearing this. So I actually don't like this move. Like, the implication goes, I think it's quite a good one. I don't think it's anything to do with money. I think that's nonsense. People are like, oh, I just turned down the bag, or did he get a better deal for G2? No. I think it is something like he didn't like the way it was looking with the Falcons lineup, and he just decided, I'll stick with what I've got. The better the devil you know, as we say in English. But I actually find that kind of wild, because if you actually look at the players, and those were legit players that they were trying to sign, the only one that's debatable is this thing of maybe Mnmzzz didn't want to go. Right, I'm not a fucking 12-year-old child, so I don't believe NiKo and Mnmzzz are best friends and must play together, and that was anything they ever said. I do think that NiKo knows Mnmzz's a really good AWPer, and he would like a really good AWPer in his team. But the weird thing about that is, to me, really good AWPer that can speak English is like the most wide category in fucking tier 1 CS right now. Like, there are a billion players you can get for that role. So I actually just find it a bit puzzling in the sense of what NiKo's thinking going back to G2. Because obviously now we're going to talk later, there's this move where JKS is benched, but I actually think this is where me and NiKo see his career differently. I'll do the quick rundown. So one, this means he's stuck with Huxley. I think that's just stupid as fuck. Like, the next majors will go the same way these ones will. They won't do anything. I do not think they'll win the major. And if you're NiKo, you're basically just playing to win the major at this point in your career. Then there's the Hunter angle. You're all going to go, it's brilliant. He gets to play with Hunter. That's only good, by the way, as long as Hunter's good at CS. The day he's bad at CS, that will become a fucking millstone around your neck, where now you don't want to cut your actual fucking blood relative who used to be good at the game. Like, who the fuck wants to do that? That's such a mistake. In my opinion, if anything, now you go and he's happy for you to go because it's the big deal, and it's your chance to actually like have done your time with him. You gave him your shot. You had your chances to win majors together, and now you go and do something else, and he gets to do whatever he wants with his career. And then the last one is the Mnmzzz one, because I'll just throw this out there. I do think the reason NiKo is the one all the fans bang on when he doesn't win the major is because when you look at his lineup of teammates, it's insane, right? You go, holy shit, how can you not win? Mate, this Mnmzzz one is fool's gold, because most tournaments, Mnmzzz is really good, but every now and then he just turns up and has a bomb-ass tournament. Like, has no one else seen how he plays? He's not permanent. He's not really simple. He doesn't really, like, bang every tournament out. It's why I told people, you have to learn how, like, simple is just on another level. Like, a bad tournament for simple is like a 1.18 rating. Like, that's a normal fucking tournament for every other star player. So Mnmzzz, there's a bunch of times, I think Katowice, I think the major, there's a bunch of times he's just been all right. So if you're someone like NiKo, you actually get wrecked from what the on-paper roster look like, because everyone forgets Mnmzzz is what, I think he's still not even 18 now, is he? Oh, he just turned 18 recently because they did that ad with the fucking casino. He's barely turned 18 and he has essentially like less than 2 years LAN experience. Like, so I think I think that G2 lineup gets a bit oversexed at times. Like, to me, if you bring a different IGL in instead of Huxley, now it's amazing. With the Huxley angle, it's clearly a flawed lineup that has certain areas which maxes the stats out. So I'm just not a fan of the overall move. I don't mind it for NiKo. It's not the end of the world. But the sad thing for me was, I actually thought the NiKo angle of that move, even more so than people like Snappy and Zonic, was the coolest part. If you had NiKo in the Falcons roster, now it really could hit the ground and potentially immediately be top 5 and actually challenge for all the tournaments. And then I was looking on paper. Dude, if you just tell me Snappy and NiKo, I'm in already. You get the rest of the players, figure out, but I'm in already. That's already an interesting prospect to me. So I'm just puzzled by why NiKo chooses this move is all.
I think with Well, okay. A little sidebar, real quick. I do like the fan implication that NiKo didn't go to the move because Mnmzzz didn't
I love
come.
it.
He's like, he's my best friend.
I
I
know.
can't go without him. And then he has an actual blood
They
relative.
think it's actually a K-pop. I know it's a K-pop
He's
team,
like,
innit? I know.
It's no, because the thing is, like, he's like, he's like, Mnmzzz, I can't leave you. My brother, my family, my friend. And then Hunter, he's like, I don't fucking, who the fuck are you? Oh, you have the same last name as me. Don't give a shit. Like, 1.3, 1.03, don't care. It's and then but he's like Mnmzzz, Mnmzzz, he would adopt Mnmzzz of his son if he could at this point, but like obviously not true. Like you said, tier 1 exceptional international English speaking operas. Like if you go to Europe, you'll just walk down the street and you'll just like find Wonderful
crazy.
like looking through a trash can or something. Like it's ultimately you're like, oh hi Wonderful, would you like to come play for Sprout? He's like, yeah sure, I don't have really anything else going on right now, and then he ends up going to Navi, right? But
dude,
it's
Dexter's on a fucking UFO somewhere orbiting the planet. No one even minds that this guy just doesn't even exist anymore. Like we're all just pretending like he stepped through into Narnia or something. Where the fuck is he? Like there's so many mega ops, it's ridiculous.
I do like how Dexter went to the bench on OG, and then it's just like you hear like these subtle rumors where it's like he could join the team, but then he's just like playing cards with himself, like on an island, like on a deserted island, with a single cut with a coconut with face carved on it. Nothing like someone please sign Dexter. That's all I want. Free him from his tetrahedron prison. Like
I like the people though where they go like that's the problem with Reddit, by the way, is like because of the upvote mechanism, it actually just trains people to repeat the same thing. So they always go, yeah, but I've heard he's really toxic. It's like, oh, if he's from Eastern Europe, he's an AWP and he's toxic. Fucking hell, what could we ever do with that? That's never worked out before. What are you talking about, bro? That's all. Yeah, spoiler. Does he breathe air as well? Fucking yeah, brilliant. I don't care. Mute the mic.
I have to work with a player. Who isn't very nice and isn't the upstairs professional. Like, what are we ever gonna? What are we ultimately gonna do to resolve this problem?
Yeah.
It's you guys have worked like jobs before, right?
I know.
Like like a job where you go and you are forced to work with the people, and sometimes they aren't nice to you. Well, imagine if you're being paid $100,000, $200,000 a year, and you got to play video games. I think we can figure this one out. Like, it's not like the rude fry cook you have to put up with. It's like the world's best opera or whatever that you're having to put up with, like calls you a cunt or whatever. But like, I don't know. Like
By the way,
Dexter Reddit narratives.
This actually leads into my point though, so we'll segue it because it's actually perfect, which is because for good, this is just a slam dunk. Wonderful to Navi. Like that's literally one of those moves. This is also why the leakers, you are so unimpressive to anyone who knows this scene. I don't even need to ever know those people were talking. When you tell me, so Navi, a team that at the moment incredibly flexes being Ukrainian and doesn't sign Russian players, they're going to temporarily lose their best player, who's a Czech's Notes primary AWPer. If only there was someone Ukrainian who's a primary AWPer who's really good on the fucking hell. Like, it writes itself. You don't even need to know anything's going. The joke is, if Navi didn't do this move, like, it's Navi that doesn't know CS, not the fucking leakers. Like, it's just such a slam dunk move all across the board. Like, even the whole angle, which is the only one you can really bring to knock it, which is, well, it isn't simple. It's like, no one is. No one is. Like, even if we just got my boy Dexter, I was just talking about who, obviously, for his nationality reasons, maybe they wouldn't sign. I don't even know if that's certain, by the way, because technically they did sign 2 Russian players to the Valorant team after the war had begun. So I will just say that. Now, I will say, I noticed they also do that thing where they remove the flag on Wikipedia and Valorant or whatever. So maybe it's a requirement, but I don't think it's actually impossible they had a Russian player. It's just they haven't done it yet in CS in a conspicuous manner. But yeah, to me, it's just an obvious signing. Like, I actually think this is almost not only the best signing you could do, it's also actually a banger, even for the potentially bullshit sort of like alibi. So, they're setting this up as like Wonderful joins, but at the same time, Simple hasn't left and he might just be on a break and maybe he comes back. Or like Richard said, maybe he swaps to Valorant and plays for Navi and Valorant or something, right? If they want to leave the door open for him to come back, I think this is also a great move still, because the point is, I mean, he even implied it himself. If his only actual problem is the fucking AWP, just be the rifle and have Wonderful be the AWPer then. Like, as long as he's really good, you actually just have an amazing team, surely. Like, if Simples is going to be a really good rifler, which I presume he would be off his skill in CSGO, and Wonderful can actually, by the way, if people don't know as well, I'd say his tracking's comparable to Mnmzzz. He just wasn't on a G2. Like, he's super fast how quickly he adapted to LAN and got better and better and better and better. If people don't know, he was the replacement for Dexter and basically immediately was just good. Like, he was just good, like, right out the gate. So, to me, I think it's just such an obvious slam dunk move to go for. And if he can actually get to essentially where Mnmzzz is at the big events, and then you have Simple as well, you've already got your 1-2 punch right there. You've already got Alexi BSC. Like, this, as mad as the mess that Navi's in now is, this one move can actually fix the whole thing. And then there's also the world where maybe Simple doesn't come back, right? Look, you can't replace a player like that. But I tell you what, this is about the closest to, like, at least start functionally with the team. After that, you're looking for what? A really good rifler. There's plenty of really good riflers. I actually think it's just a banger move all around. It's one of the rare times where I have no complaint. I think it's the right move for Wonderful, for Navi, for the Simple angle, for the team. I actually think this, also another thing is, I think if this works out well and they don't have to, like, replace him as an AWP and Simple kicks him out the team, this is another player, by the way, who could be in Navi for like 5 years and end up being like an all-time great player. I think he has that potential.
One thing with this Simple dipping out of the team thing and how he said, oh, maybe the op doesn't feel good and it, I might just rifle. The update that they just did made the op feel a lot better, actually, because I kind of had the same feeling of it, where it was that if you flick to somebody really fast with the op, like it sometimes wouldn't actually connect with where you flicked your crosshair to. And someone did a nice example on Reddit where they like slowed down the time scaling, and that it's like before they had this update, if you shot and flicked and let go, it would actually not really, it would go kind of like where your crosshair was as opposed to where it was landing, and now it's actually going where you landed. So like the flicky oppers are now like, they should be getting better again at CS2. So that's one thing. So I think Simple actually could easily be coming back, and I kind of get his whole like idea of taking a break, and like for example, like for the Richard statement where he said he might just switch to Valorant, I think Simple was pretty serious about the, like, he doesn't want to play the game for the first few months and just let the game fix itself. Because if you kind of like change your mechanics to feel more what CS2 did at the very beginning in the beta, you might actually develop habits that are, sure, they're good for the first month or two of the game, but they actually don't end up being good. And because the game is slowly trying to become CSGO again, like they're just trying to make sure that the new engine and everything makes it feel like that as much as possible, with the added benefits of being able to change it in different directions a little bit easier for Valve. Beyond that, Wonderful is such a good move for this team, because the way I see Wonderful is like, he's like a souped up Montu, and Alexi B already made Montu look very serviceable for OG, peaking at top 5 in the world in the online era. But Wonderful is a system opper that just hits such a higher rate of his shots. If you put him in hard, tough situations, he's just going to deliver more than Montu did. And with the fact that Alexi B, if he's able to tell an opper a little bit of what to do, give suggestions here and there, that opper is going to listen to him. It seems like by the system, they actually have to listen to him, based off of how Mnmzzz changed before and after Alexi B. But then that's just what Wonderful was doing when he was playing for Spirit. He was playing well within the system that Chopper created. He was much less brash than Dexter. He was going for less opening picks, but he actually ended up with a better rating at big events than Dexter. So this is like the perfect tool for Alexi B to unlock further. And I do think that if Simple comes back and he just takes the place of Ema, because if we're looking at this roster, just hard and true, like, Ema's been the weakest link here, and if you just get Simple back, who can play rifle or just hybrid, man, this team is actually very strong all of a sudden.
Simple is just so lucky. He's gifted with so many skills. You think about the fact where it's like, I'm a tier 1 opper. I don't want to op anymore. I'm just going to go become a tier 1 rifler. And it's like, no player should be this good where he's like, top 5 team in the world, guys, I don't want to op anymore. Can you cut your second best rifler for me so I can be like the best rifle on your team? It's not fair. It's so unfair. No one should be this good at everything except for, personality. Anyways, so Wonderful. It's such a good move on paper too, because one understated element of this is now that Navi's international. Wonderful's been playing on English-speaking teams for a year and a half now, so there's gonna be no startup time for him. He's gonna be the best match for it. It's a good match for team culture too. He does still speak Ukrainian or Russian, so he can still sort of be a friend or a colleague to Bit and Blade, and sort of keep the culture balance on the team going well. And like you said, he's much more of like a systems operator. It's someone who Alexi B should really be able to excel with the exception of Mnmzzz and briefly Simple before he benched himself. I feel like Alexi B's really worked with like non-superstar operas, so it should just be a natural fit for him on all fronts. So this move is like, I think it's not getting the attention it deserves because he's coming from a team like Sprout, so people are kind of thinking like, oh, he's just, a fill-in player. He's just a stand until Simple can come back. But ultimately, he is does have the potential to be a great fit for this team and potentially, be someone who could not replace Simple, but on any other team, it's like a winning opera.
I mean, the mad thing is, this is where this guy, no one watches Sprout or Tier 2 play, basically, or when Sprout was just in CIS region. Because, like, the joke is, if I was all those fans of Cloud9, I would have been like, why aren't we getting this guy instead of Shiro? Like, this would be a slam dunk for us, too. Like, bring this guy in and we're immediately cooking with gas again. We could do something. Also, as an aside, actually, one point you bring up there, Mnmzzz, I hadn't even thought of is, also, to be fair, bearing in mind it's an international team now, having your new young recruit be someone who speaks Russian is going to be fucking great with Blade. Like, Blade can speak English, but he'd obviously rather speak his native language. Like, it's going to be way easier for him to explain some super complicated concept to the player. And if you think about it, with the team he's got now, like, Bit's actually in good form again. He's actually sort of turned his shit around. It's merely just this guy. If he gets wonderful bedded in, they're just good immediately. Like, I actually think that's how you know this move slept on. Because I actually thought the biggest bomber about Simple taking the break is like, they just had that mad run at the end of CSGO where they made the final Pro League and everyone's like, hey, maybe this team could be good. But then it's like, we got fucking blue balls. Whereas now it's like, back on it. Wonderful's good. Well, let's see again. Let's see what this lineup can actually do. Right, let's switch up then. So, Jeff, what is your bad point?
So bad point for me. Actually, sorry, I gotta say one thing about the Simple Valorant thing. Is I trust Richard to be right, but I also feel like a player saying I'm going to Valorant is like a kid saying they're going to run away from home. Especially considering the fact that the main complaint CS:GO players have about CS2 is it feels too much like Valorant. So you hate Valorant Lite, so you're going to dark chocolate Valorant, with nuts, and you're gonna have to learn how to, do all this, smokes and the, ultimate that drags you can't move and you get pulled into a room and you die, or the 1v1 arena or whatever. I think he's just saying that because he's pissed off about CS2. Like, I don't actually believe he would enjoy Valorant at all, everything we know about him, considering he's much more of a mechanics player than like a abilities player. I just feel like abilities would drive him nuts because a player is less mechanically skilled than him is going to win off of some, flashbanging him 4 times and pulling him into the 1v1 dungeon of death or whatever. Like, there's no way that he would be happy there. It's almost like, it's almost a complaint. Like, maybe he'll stand in for like 2 months and then be like, okay, CS2 is good enough. Navi, please put me back in my home. But like, it's not, he's going to come down from his room eventually and, unpack his bags, surely. But so my bad point for this week is the fact that I feel like with Astralis' efforts to continually kill Heroic, they may have destroyed the Danish scene in the sense that if you think about where the Danish IGLs are now, not a single one of them, with the exception of BlameF, is on a Danish team anymore. Cadian's going to Liquid. Glavis potentially going to Ends reportedly to replace Snappy. Snappy's going to Falcons. And so if you sort of think about what
Carrigan's in FaZe, yeah, there's everyone's out there. Yeah.
MSL's retired. If you think about who's left in the Danish scene, who's going to train the next generation of Danish players and who's going to keep that scene running? We talk about, for example, in North America, none of the old 1.6 IGLs taught the Go IGLs, and then the Go IGLs, like a lot of them got either banned from iBuy Power or they never really trained up their replacements. And now the NA scene has such a lack of IGLs. Same with the Swedish scene; their old players never taught their new generation. So you go BlameF, who's the next best IGL in Denmark, who's not an international team, like Bird from Sky. I think Patty's an IGL, maybe. I can't think of anyone after that who immediately pops to my head of someone who's gonna, find the next Danish star, teach him how to play the game, who's gonna find the new, 17-year-old IGL, teach him how to play the game. And it may not be an issue now, but if you consider too the fact that the best Danish IGLs are all, 28 to 35, if they wait 3 years before coming back to the Danish scene to maybe, teach the next generation, they're gonna be 38, they're gonna be approaching, 40 years old. 5 years from now, what's the Danish scene going to look like? Is it going to look like the Swedish scene? And this is all because of Astralis, conspiring to get Cadian out of Heroic, forcing, almost luring him to go to Liquid, and then, Stown and, Jabby go to the bench, killing Heroic. And if you look at it too, Snappy went to Astralis and they kind of spit him out. He ended up on Ents. They mistreated Glaive to the point where he briefly retired, and now he's going to go to international team. In a way, Nicola Nyholm and Casper Pivot over time have destroyed the Danish scene by making all the Danish IGLs jaded and leaving the scene.
Cutting
Not
off
good.
cutting off the lineage of leaders to teach young up and comers has already decimated the North American space, and I'm glad you bring up that example because I think that's probably the most obvious case where we see that, especially when the iBuyPower guys got banned, how it just sort of slowed the progress of the region so drastically, which then snowballed into EPL slots getting taken away from North American teams too. But and so it is a bit of a shame to see that so many of them have moved on. But I think that it's kind of just a weird, sad thing that I've sort of just reckoned with, which is that so much of this game now is just becoming English speaking. Whoever's the best in the space is just gonna, like, the face it culture of just everybody's gonna team up with everybody now. And already I feel like the death of the national team, we're well past that. And I don't even think that there's really too much of not too much patriotism floating around these parts anymore. People are just kind of hyped about their favorite player who they'll follow to every single team.
You think it's like the NBA? It's just super teams where the stars just make the teams now.
Yeah, and kind of, and that most of them are just going to be European mixes that,
sure,
in a lot of ways are kind of, I don't want to use the word like lifeless or like, but they don't really have as much of a clear direction. Whereas before it was such a fun narrative point that we could point to the Danish style of CS, or we could point to the Brazilian style of CS. And those words used to mean something to me pre-2017, pre-2018. But after, especially like COVID really exacerbated this, that once everybody just started playing from home and everybody started learning some semblance of English through Faceit Pugs and FPL, then we're just now getting these mixes where everybody's just cycling the same strategies amongst each other, and domestic competition has really fallen off by the wayside. And that's why, in a weird way, that like I'm really glad that the Asia scene, for example, is popping off, because I would say that they have their own unique brand of Counter-Strike, which to this day still persists. But when you're talking about random Euro mixed team 37, I don't really think like strat for strat they're doing anything differently than Euro mixed team number 3.
The scary thing about Asia, though, is they're importing a lot of European players now to that, and there's a chance of that unique Asian CS just being amalgamate English hard of just being absorbed into like the European super meta. You're seeing like, Kriaz, Blogs, all those guys heading over to China. I think they realize they don't have the talent to make their own super teams, with the exception of Tai Lu. But just a sidebar there, like, watch out, it could happen. China could be pulled into the West before you know it, and they could just have like a Danish IGL too.
Because the other problem I have is, like, obviously, if you're a fucking mark, you just go, what do you mean? They have Blame F. Who gives a shit? Like, I don't know why everyone gets hyped about him being an IGL. Like, as far as I can tell, his main strength is he still gets all the same frags, which actually, quite frankly, since I don't think he's the best IGL, it's probably a negative, if we're being honest. Like, in fact, what's sad to me is because he got all the same frags, even not being an IGL, it's just so obvious he shouldn't be the IGL. Like, that means, guess what? His game's nailed. It's actually quite rare that those players that are IGL lurker can then still make it work. He's already got it elsewhere. So to me, I don't even get the angle. But yeah, you're right. If you did a list of like names that you can go 5 deep, and they don't have any of the monostrals. They don't have Snappy, Carrigan, Huxley, Glaive, Arcadian. Now, obviously, they tried Glaive and they don't want that anymore. I mean, by the way, that's also what fucked their whole team. Like, the Zipnik's contract was pretty bad, but the Glaive contract was worse because you signed him and it meant you had the window, by the way, when you could have like had a Carrigan, that just passed you by. The window, by the way, you could have had Snappy if you'd wanted to, like 6 months ago. He'd come in immediately. If you told him you're going to make a lineup and give him people like devices, he'd come immediately. You could have had Snappy. By the way, I mean, I don't think here's the low-key thing. I wish you'd all stop gaslighting me this fucking scene. Have you noticed, Mnmzzz? You never, ever hear a single rumour, ever. Heroic and Astralis are trying to get Huxley. Every one of these lineups, we're making a super team. There's never Huxley in the fucking mix, is he? It's weird how we're supposed to simultaneously believe he's amazing, but it's only in this one context of this one team. Apparently, no teammate believes in him, no org believes in him. I don't get it, mate. So to me, go on.
The sad thing with Huxley is that, well, the even more sad thing with Huxley is that he's almost like the replacement for Hunden in the scene, I almost feel like.
Okay.
If Hunden didn't ruin his reputation and become sort of, cursed goods and have to go play or go coach, Asahi, which is a meat company CS team, he would be in a much more prime position. Think about it. Hunden, like his best player he's working with right now is AZ. Like it's all wrong. It's all wrong in Denmark right now. But Huxi, I think his best trait is helping helping young Danish players, and I think that's the role he had on Copenhagen Flames. But now that he's an international team, he can't even become a teacher for Danish players on like a top 30 team, like top 25 team in the world. 4 young Danish players, they maybe make a major, they maybe make a LAN here and there, and then they go up into heroic or they go up into Stralis. Ideally, if he ever leaves G2, you'd want him to become a talent scout or a coach, but he's the only one who's really in a position to do that, because the other Danish IGLs are still very valuable as players. Like Kerrigan could eventually become a talent scout and a coach, but I don't see that for now. Will he still able to play at a tier 1 level? Or even, someone like, I think Glaive still has value as a player, maybe not, in tier 1, but like Mauisnake said, the fact that the scene has become so internationalized. I remember when it used to be like exciting for an international team to form. When the original super FaZe clan team with Guardian, Olaf, and NiKo and all that formed, it was like whoa. And then you have Maus, who becomes an aspiring international team, and you're like, oh, it's FaZe Junior. And then you're like, next team, oh, FaZe Junior, FaZe Junior, FaZe Junior. And it's not novel to be international anymore. It's sort of like blasé. And like you said, I think that also hurts the fan experience. There's no international component, or there's no nationalism component to CS anymore, where a team will naturally be like, this is the best team in Sweden, I'm going to root for them in Jönköping, or there's only one French team right now. Like, that's fucked up, and it's just weird. And I think it's ultimately a bad thing for the Danish scene, but on a more meta level, it's bad for every scene that we're sort of we're almost moving to sort of like a League of Legends style, where these teams are just international mixes of whatever are the best players in each 5 roles.
This also just shows to me that like Astralis doesn't look at the bigger picture. Because in my opinion, like Snappy and Cadian, if you did it right, are the most slam dunk signings you could have had. They're not only the best IGLs, they would do this role in an awesome fashion. They seem like great captains. And then in the case of Cadian, right, I'll tell you right now, everyone now would go, oh, you're talking about Thorin. Cadian joining Astralis. That's like a storyline that'll last 5 minutes. If he joined Astralis and they were actually really good with Blame F and Device also in the team, he would become one of the most popular players with the Astralis fans. Like, people would fucking love him. You know how spots are. Like, if some guy, like the classic examples of people like Dennis Rodman or Meta World Peace, if they play for some other team, you hate them because you think they're all dirty. You know how sick they are when you join your team, though. Then you're like, oh, fucking hell, yes. Now we get to win. Now he does that for my team. That's how sports fans are. They'll flip on a dime. And so I actually think it's just a massive fuck up from Astralis. Like, if they'd have played it right, both those players were there. Like, the idea Cadian goes to Liquid, not even your team. It's like, bro, he wants to live in Denmark. He fucking loves everything Danish. Like, how have you fumbled the bag so badly on this one? Like, to me, it's a slam dunk. Because, yeah, I agree also, by the way. The other thing that did fuck them with the whole Hunden scandal, the fact he has to leave now, is the one reason I always said, even after that scandal, they should sign Hunden, is because it's like, with all the buyouts, you're just saving yourself money in the future. Like, if he sees that guy, think about all these players, 3 months, but you know what? I'll give you a freebie. I'll give you an example of how scouting saves you massive amounts of money. Do you want to know a fucking straight fire piece of info? Again, no leaker will tell you. Right? Supposedly, the players in MIBR/SK had actually already scouted that K Serato might be really good, and they just decided not to sign him and went with like some other player when they had the option. And this is before Furia did that breakout and beat Astralis. So they could have had the best player already. They could have literally done like some insane transition where you go from like the Fur and Cold era into like fucking K Serato comes up, and you just never drop off it. But they didn't see it. They didn't have the wherewithal. But if you'd have had some 100 type character, I guarantee you they get the player like that. That's the thing they're amazing at, is finding that guy when he's like at tier 2.5 and you know like that. Because the problem is you can't do what HLTV does. You can't just look at the guy with the highest number and go, one for the future. It's like anyone can see the number. The problem is we all know it doesn't always translate. What you're actually looking for, if you're some like a guy with amazing eye like Blade or Zeus or something, you're looking for the guy where there's like fundamental ways that he plays the position. Like, oh, that's weird. That's advanced actually. Like, you shouldn't be doing that on this level. And that would even work. You know, they have the eye for that shit, and they're the best at that. So I also think it's insane they didn't do that within Astralis, because let's be fair, if you look at Astralis, they only seem like they want to spend money on sure thing. Like, if you are Blame F and Device, they'll give you a big contract. If you were Zipnix and Glaive, who aren't even good anymore, they'll give you a big contract. They're not going to be the guys who break the bank like a Monacy and do some insane signing when you're already like legit and proven. Like, they wouldn't do a move like that. So to me, they need someone who fucking scouts. It should be their number one thing they want in the team, because they clearly don't want to spend a lot of money. If people don't know, in League of Legends right now, they're about to just sell their slot for loads of money. So I don't think, if you've ever looked at those yearly reports, the org actually, it's quite quite well run as a business, if people don't know. It actually does like stay like decent cash flow and stuff. But it's not one that, it's not like this Falcon shit where they have loads of money. Like they have to, their name Astralis is big, but as a team, that's why the signings end up being people. They themselves get people from Sprouts. They're not going with the biggest names. So I agree with the overall point, though. It's very sad for the future of not just Astralis, Danish Counter-Strike. Like, let's be real, Astralis is the last real team because no one knows what's going to happen with Heroic yet. If they fuck that up, the team's dead.
And because they killed everyone else. They almost formed themselves intentionally to be the last Danish team because they burned every single bridge behind them. They gave, Cadian the double-barreled middle finger twice and multiple times in his history. Heroic's now owned by 1xBet. There's no guarantee they're Danish forever. They could go international. There's no reason they don't do that. If the org is, Norwegian/Russian, and we don't have teams like Copenhagen Flames, we don't have teams like Copenhagen Flames, Copenhagen Wolves, Masonic, I don't believe is fielding a team anymore. All these smaller Danish orgs who are pretty good at bringing players up don't exist anymore, and I think it's honestly because of Astralis. Like, it's weird to say. Well, it's not weird to say because of the way they are as a company. But they almost, brought the end of times to Denmark single-handedly.
Well, here's the thing. I did warn everyone that Nikolai Nihon was a harbinger of the apocalypse. So I was there years at a time. Right, okay.
Listen.
Go on.
I said they didn't listen.
Oh, they didn't. No, that's the problem. The problem in esports, mate, is Mitchell has the same problem. We just have the curse of Cassandra. Like, we are right. It's just people don't like our personality, so they just go, I'm just going to pretend you're wrong. And then when it happens, just go, I knew that anyway. So you didn't, but okay. You can all say you did. Right. What, Mauisnake? Speaking of the aforementioned launders / community response, what is your bad point?
Well, I changed. Okay, the order I did bad and ugly is different now because of the latest news. No, just hear me out. You'll get what my ugly point is after. No, the bad point is the recent news that just came out right before we started this podcast. The JKS being benched.
You just said that was going to be your ugly one.
No, I'm moving this one to bad, and then the other one that was my bad is now my ugly. Okay, my bad. Okay. Just hear me out. Hear me out though. Okay, the JKS move is obviously bad given what we know about the rumor right now that they're looking at Nexa to possibly replace him. That just seems like the most whack part of this. I'll speak of this first in isolation before we even stick Nexa into the equation here. But to take out JKS to me is such a huge oversight in terms of I don't know if somehow NiKo coming back to G2 after turning down Falcons, he came back to G2 and was like, I'll rejoin you guys, but only if you get rid of JKS. I'd be like, what are you talking about? You don't, because we also talked about the whole thing with, Hooksie's playing with different tools than Alexi B was when he's playing with G2. The fact that instead of Jax and Alexi B, it is now Hooksy and JKS. And I know a lot of people want to give Hooksy a lot of credit because of what he's doing, and people are saying he's basically doing it with the same roster. He's able to accomplish what Alexi B couldn't. Well, JKS is a huge improvement over Jax, and even though JKS hasn't captured necessarily any of the MVPs for G2 in some of their crazy runs this year, I mean, his numbers at some of these big events were insane. And at Katowice especially earlier this year, he put up a 1.24. He actually, of all the people on G2, I'm pretty sure he had the best overall rating for that team. It's just that I think, I don't even know, come playoffs, maybe, they thought that some of the numbers for the other people, Hunter, were better. I mean, I did think that actually, when I think back of that grand finals, Hunter was insanely good. He was bringing back a lot of, man deficit situations for them and whatnot. But, I mean, it goes without saying that JKS, role for role, is one of the strongest in the scene right now. As an anchor position, a lurker, he's obviously not ROPS in some of these lurk positions, but he's pretty damn good. He's pretty damn consistent. He's not a hindrance to the team by any means. And so then bringing in the other side of this, that they're bringing in Nexa, is just so confusing to me. That to me is where I definitely just had to put this in bad, because if you had a replacement in mind that somehow was better than JKS, for example, if FaZe is actually getting torn apart, if they're actually able to get ROPS into the same positions as JKS, I would say I would have a different opinion of this one. But as it stands right now, the rumor is Nexa, and I'm just confused. I just don't understand that at all. We obviously know that with Nexa and G2 in that old lineup, I mean, they were able to get to the grand finals of the Stockholm Major, but that's quite some time ago. And since then, Nexa's just been kind of toiling on OG, no real results of note. As an individual, I think he's just been all right, but he hasn't even been playing as strong of opposition as JKS is. And so it seems like they're replacing a player who, I wouldn't say he's a star, but he was a very sufficient and solid anchor lurker piece in JKS with a guy that I guess is going to be secondary calling behind Hooksy. Like, there has to be some other kind of move here, or else it's just flat out bad.
Jump in.
It's just like the worry for me is I feel like the NiKo coming back into G2 and then Nexa coming in is almost like you said. It's almost like I'll come back to G2, but I want Nexa back, because apparently NiKo sees something in Nexa that we don't, and for whatever reason that is even better than JKS, which I think, like you said, is patently untrue at this point. He's been out of the limelight as a player for going on 2 years now, since that major finals performance at Stockholm, and it's almost reminds me of the old there's something in like quite old Return to By the Numbers, the President for Life NiKo concept, where he surrounded himself, once he cut Kerrigan, he surrounded himself with like yes men, and so he's like, I'm the dictator for life, anyone who disagrees with me gets killed. And I was really worried back before they got Alexi B that they were going to get Emmy as their IGL, because he, Pekka became the GM. He has, his cousin, so he's building like he's building like the dictatorship around him of his, Serbian supporters. And so Nexa coming in almost feels like a move of comfort for NiKo as the dictator of this team, reasserting himself as the leader. And so you kind of have to think if that's actually true, which it's more of like a fan fiction conspiracy theory for me, harkening back to the old days of FaZe. But like you said, if NiKo's secondary calling, maybe NiKo as a precondition coming back is like laying the theoretical framework for Hooksy to be out of the team. And he wants to experiment with Nexa as the IGL because he sees something in Nexa we don't. But even then, that is worrying to me, because I don't think Nexa can really be the IGL of a team of this caliber and succeed.
The problem with this one is I actually do think that it must be related to NiKo, because the idea this move comes right on the heels of him deciding not to join Falcons, and then he signed this guy. Like, there is another angle, which is, people might not know, the GM of this team, that Pekka guy, is himself Serbian and is thick as thieves with all the... If you don't know, it's not a meme. Unlike, actually, the stupid angle where you all saw a bunch of videos of Mnmzzz and Jax and Mnmzzz and NiKo, and you all think they're best friends. No, the joke is, like, Nexa, NiKo and Hunter are all good pals and are the sort of people who like to hang out at an event, and there is the Serbian crew of them and Janko and Kasad and all who'd always be at the event, etc. The problem that I have with this one is it does just scream nepotism. It just sounds like they just thought, like, because here's the thing, I don't think they're analysing it like actually in the game stuff, Mnmzzz. I think they're really just doing it like, the boys, like, but if we played together, it's the sort of conversation you have at like 1 a.m. in a bar with your friends, but then you don't really wake up the next day and do it. Like, you go, oh, let's just get a fucking van and just fucking drive, man. It'd be sick. Like, and then, like, by Sunday, who knows where we're at? You don't really then wake up, like, there's a Doug Stanhope bit I'm doing here, at like 8 in the morning the next morning to come out and start like, beep, beep, like, what, you haven't got your stuff ready? Like, we're going in the van. Like, that was a fucking crazy idea at 1 a.m. Like, you don't really go and do that. So I think this is an example of whether or not he called the shot explicitly, this is why I made that whole thing about NiKo. It is funny how if he doesn't, all the things that seem to be what he wants to happen just manifest around him. What has he figured out? The secret TM or something? What a fucking... This guy's vision board must be fucking bonkers. Shame you didn't put a major trophy on there. Well, then again, the joke is, maybe you did, but you put like a real major trophy, and then that blast one was obviously some shout of a Kinder Egg, so you wrecked yourself on that one. The other thing I would say...
Go on. I don't want to worry you here, but we can know a problem starting to develop if at the next LAN we see like Kasad slowly walking into frame with like the G2, and he's like, hey, and like NiKo invites him to the throne, invites Swanee to the throne room. He's like, hey, I want to have a quick meeting with you. And we just never see Swanee again. And Kasad's, announcing G2's Kasad, and it's just the Serbian mothership. And then like Janko comes in as an analyst.
Because by the way, what you're saying there is, though, there's more circumstantial things you can add in, mate. Like, I'll tell you something that was really disturbing that now I'm suddenly getting mad PTSD remembering, which is at the end of the lineup, now we talked about when they had Nexa and the lineup with Amanek and Jax, that famously, right before they did get Alexi B, Hunter made this really weird interview statement where it was the headline, and he said there won't be any roster moves. So that was what Hunter, and spoiler, that means Hunter and NiKo, that's what they wanted, was no roster moves. So that means they wanted Nexa to stay. And if you remember, they were even at the time floating the idea, maybe Hunter just becomes the IGL and Nexa stays. Like, these were two things they were putting out there themselves, like directly as players into the space. So I actually get the vibe, dude. There might be a world where it's like G2 themselves. Look, I know Carlos himself had a lot to say in the Alexi B lineup. There might be a world where essentially G2 was like, no, we want you to try this org. And then now that's part of why NiKo comes back. It's like, right, but I want to go back to like an org with the Serbian guys I want to play with, which by the way, the problem is just as an analyst, it just doesn't sound like an interesting lineup. It just sounds a bit whatever, doesn't it? Like, and quite frankly, it just sounds worse than the last lineup.
He's the voice of Hunter's the voice of Sauron. You know, he comes out and he says, Hooksy will not be killed. And then it's like, Hooksy has been moved to the bench, and we've had a fantastic time with him. And introducing Nexa will be the IGL, and we've added our good friend, like, you know, Emmy, or I don't know.
Well, the thing is, at least Hunter like has the, you know, he has the sort of like the demeanor for it, doesn't he? He's a really amiable guy. As with NiKo's like, shut up, everyone, bring him in now, release the prisoner JKS. Like, you know, he just fucking do that when he just set the Dobermans off after him. The only thing is though, on the JKS angle, I have to talk about this. This is one of the worst roster moves I think I've ever seen in Counter-Strike. Just the history of Counter-Strike. This is bad for everyone involved. Like, it's terrible for JKS, by the way. He will never be in this insane position unless he's joining fucking FaZe right now. He is not going to be in this position. Like, he gets to be, on paper, the fourth best player, but as Maui pointed out, essentially to me, he's comparable to Rain. He really can also, every now and then, be the MVP of the event or just do like a 1.18 rating, while you've got three guys who frag out of control. Like, that makes your team OP as fuck, because they also, like Rain, fit their role. Like, they're both doing the role of the shitter player who can't frag out, and then they're just giving you, like, unfair advantages where sometimes they do just carry the rest of the team. Like, this actually, by the way, if NiKo was at all involved with this move, like it's JKS goes, bro, you just don't know Counter-Strike. I'll just say that straight up. Like, you have a different, like, me and you don't even exist in the same universes. Like, to me, I'm watching Counter-Strike and you're watching, like, I don't know, fucking Hearthstone or something. I don't know what you're seeing in the game, because, like, this is one of the more, like, if I had to give, like, fucking support player of the year or role player of the year, fucking JKS would probably be like, it's him and Rain just contending for it. Like, there's not even anyone else in the discussion at this point in time. Maybe Madden. It's like those three names are about it, right? So I don't get it as well. And then also, the part I find so crazy is, this just implies the rest of the team went along with this too. So when they were winning all those tournaments, and this is why I hate fucking star players when they take too much control. In my opinion, as a star player, you take control in this and it's like, I want really good players. But you don't like think you're the GM and run the whole squad. And here's why it sucks. Because they really do, by the way, lose a tournament, like pick up the major. And instead of going, NiKo, you had a pretty bad last game. Modesty, you kind of fell off a bit. They just go, we need more fraggers. And you just kick out, like an HLTV forum noob, you kick out the worst fragger and just bring in another one. Like, I've made this analogy a million times. It would be like having a fucking football team and just having like 6 strikers in it. If you then go, we're still not scoring enough, get another striker. No! Get strikers that work and then functional players that do the other roles, you idiot. Like, I don't, like, essentially, what I would spin back to anyone in G2 is this. What did JKS do to warrant this move? Like, I can't comprehend what this is. Like, it's not even like I can even remember ever him, like, having a really big pivotal game where he shit the bed. Like, I don't think it's ever even happened. He's had games that haven't been good, but, like, that's the other thing. Eye test-wise, it wasn't just numbers. He was just doing his job fucking amazingly. And also, you know, another thing that's mad underrated is he also will just win you random 1vx out of nowhere for no reason whatsoever. So he also, like, simultaneously had fragging, and he fits the role, and he gives, like, sort of a Zipmix component. Like, what more at this point, NiKo, what do you want? Does someone just have to have, like, a Serbian passport? Is that the only way they're allowed to be in your team? I don't get it, mate. I don't get it. It's such a weird move to me. It's so bizarre. In fact, the only angle I could see for this that wouldn't make it terrible, and to be fair, we're doing this video and we don't know, like, what's going to, like, we don't technically know who replaces him yet. Now he's just going off what we're speculating on. The only angle that would make this make sense is if it turned out it was actually like JKS wanted to leave and he was going to, like, FaZe. Unless it's that, I think this move's terrible. If G2 initiated this, I think it's one of the worst moves ever.
The top to bottom nepotism that seems more likely here is really what seems like this could kind of, in a way, have a cascading effect where G2 just becomes less and less competitive.
Dude, even the way this comes forwards, it's like, bros, you're not beating the nepotism allegations when you do your moves like this. Are you? Like, the timing's terrible in it. I know.
Yeah.
we don't have enough firepower. I think I know a guy for the job. And then just like Nexa walks in and you're like, Hoopsy's like, oh, I'm so fucking dead. Like, it's so over for me.
Also, am I just missing something? It's not like Nexa was. Here's the one thing. If been sat on the shelf and they just know secretly he's really good still. I saw him in OG. It was fucking terrible. Like, I like the guy as a person, but it was that was a non-starter from the beginning to the end, and it wasn't actually that big a surprise to me, unfortunately, that they benched him. Like, as far as I can, he couldn't frag or ride GL. Neither was working out. So I don't get it. Like, unfortunately, this is why. I mean, I'll just say it this way: you can't complain if you're people like the Pekka guy or NiKo that we're speculating this, because you haven't given us a plausible reason that you've done this move. That's your issue. Like, it doesn't make any sense in the server, doesn't make any sense outside the server, unless this one angle becomes involved. And if it isn't, then like I say, you've fucked up the messaging, because it looks like that's the problem. The timing is too bad with the NiKo story. That makes it look like it has to be like this.
It's like when a team like Liquid, for example, got Patsy and Rainmaker, at least they had like Daps and Joka Steve come out and like lay out like a thesis.
Yeah, fair play for that. Yeah,
they got out the whiteboard. They said like, this player, Daps is a skilled talent scout, and they're like, no, Nex is just the Minister of Agriculture now, and you just have to deal with it. He's the minister. Oh, he's also the Minister of Defense now, and yeah, it's definitely a bad point. Like, I don't see any way, unless like JKS is going to Falcons or something. I mean, like, if JKS ends up just sitting on G2's bench for 6 months, it's gonna be such a loss for the scene.
I mean, the obvious joke here is there's just obviously some really fucking idiosyncratically specific Serbian way of making his coffee that NiKo likes. Right, here's my bad point. It's actually... Oh, that's the thing. Technically, some people we'll see where Maui goes on this one. Technically, I'm encroaching on his livelihood. But I don't do these events, mate, so I don't have to give a fuck. How fucking whack is it that we're back to online tournaments being like a real part of the scene? Where we're watching an online tournament and we're like, and this person's the MVP. By the way, they will never on Liquipedia ever actually make that tiered system visible. Everyone in history will always just go, he has 17 MVPs. Like, I want to know who has the big event MVP. I don't care if you won like a small land with 4 teams years ago, So the problem with that one is, we're doing this thing where everyone just pretended like it was 2020 again during that Thunder pick thing. Like, oh, well, they're back. And, oh, wow, they're winning this team. Oh, wow, what's going on with this team? And the whole time I'm just thinking like, look, I get that if nothing's going on in the week, it's cool that there's a tournament, but this isn't part of the circuit for me. Like, the circuit's lands. Like, I already have had to accept that the land circuit will never be as big. Like, we're never going to actually have it where there's like 4 lands a month. It's going to be like 1.5 months for each tier 1 land. I get that. But the idea, like, in the meantime, we're doing online tournaments and then we're pretending they all count again. It's like, really? Who gives a shit? Does anyone actually, are we all pretending it's 2020, we just care about online tournaments again? Do we really? I don't, at least. I don't.
I care about them in so much as if they are paying me to care for them. But
that's,
if they
that's
aren't
not a bad
paying
reason
for
to
me,
care. Yeah.
Because as a freelancer, I mean, I'm not really beholden to having to respect that tournament unless I'm on their payroll, and I'm not on their payroll. So I don't like the Thunder Pick and Rubet things are just like, yeah, I mean, I feel like they're just supposed to be something that fills the time between events, and in a fun way for the players, I guess, they get to relax at home a little bit. Probably that hopefully will mean that we don't hear as much about like travel complaints and stuff like that from them, because even though they were competing in that time, it was from the safety of their own homes. So yeah, I don't really like, I think Rops won the Thunder Pick one, for example, but I'm not really like, that doesn't vault him to some other status this year for me whatsoever. I barely really take too much from it. I kind of like watching when people like Fizico and Art out here put together all the cool plays that people are doing in these online cups. I think that's actually, honestly, I think that's more interesting than anything. It's like, oh, people are test running all of these cool little tactics and strats, and this is a good time of any to try them to see, is this actually viable here, or is this something that we're going to scrap before the actual real big events come back? And yeah, I would even consider, like, I know, look, like Kassad loves to throw around the Banana Cup term, but like, compared to like a fall finals or whatever, this doesn't really mean that much to me. Like, it's just so, and what's crazy is that the prize pool that they're throwing into these is actually pretty absurd. Like,
it's amazing.
Like,
yeah.
VP just collected $250,000 total from both the Rubet and Thunder Pick events, and it's just like, that's going to look so good at the end of the year, and it's going to look freaking good on these Valve rankings, which is also one upsetting thing, that the Valve rankings, given that it's off of prize money, I don't know what the multiplier is necessarily for LAN versus offline, but having huge online events with giant prize pools has such a huge effect from what I remember reading about how that ranking system was graded, and that's obviously going to affect, you know, people that are going to the RMR or skipping the close qualifiers. And yeah, I think thankfully for our sake, the teams that did pretty well in these events were teams we would have expected to do well in LAN events, but that doesn't really change the fact that that's not always going to be the case.
So technically, this tournament did actually count towards people. I know it's miles away, but like potentially qualifying to the RMR because it affects your ranking.
I mean, the formula is open source. You can look at the formula and see how much it counts for. I don't think any of us have, you know, gone to the trouble of looking at it. You would hope it's not too big, but I will say Valve has been pretty receptive of people's sort of critiques of their ranking system, and because it's transparent, like for example, they recently changed the weighting system for a team to get onto the rankings. It went from 5 matches to 10 matches, and that was something that I believe some player in NA was complaining about because like a random mixed team made it up there. I think maybe it was Sponge's team from like some show match that made it on there.
Okay.
Or no, it was Pimp's team, right?
Oh.
Pimp's team, yeah. And it was like number like 35 in Europe because they won like a show match. But and once the Valve fixed it, it fell off of the ranking table. So they are receptive. So you could see a world in which Valve is like looking at the state of the scene and they're like, yeah, there are too many online events, and they just decrease the weight. Yeah. I know it's crazy to say, but I think we are entering a good era for Valve where they are actually more receptive to these things than ever before. We see them making patches that are related to like what players' complaints are. We're seeing them make adjustments to the rankings based on what the community feedback is. It's not perfect, but I think there is room for this to be fixed and not potentially affect the major cycle too much. But yeah, these online events are just so. They've replaced the DreamHack Opens. They replaced Star Ladder events. They replaced sort of these tier 2 events where teams would really get their start and get experience. I know from as an NA sort of obsessed person, when I saw like, oh, Wildcard and Nouns and all these NA teams are going to, Europe, they've qualified to Thunder Pick World Championships, and it's just on an event. Oh, they're just playing from their boot camp. Never mind. Don't care. The experience is not that valuable for them. They can play as much online as they want to. In fact, they play too much online sometimes to the point where they have no LAN experience. And then, final point, you did say like, oh, I hate that the Liquipedia guys, they did the thing with the MVP.
It's accurate.
You do the right here. Direct all complaints, in my general direction. Like we can build a better Liquipedia if you just complain louder. Like okay. I promise you. Because I know for
all example, it needs is a tweak. Just do like an overall one, then do like big events MVPs and then something like that, or color coded.
You're talking like the top
yes.
10 thing, right?
Yeah.
We have decreased the weight of online events before, especially during COVID, because we're like, this is stupid. When a team has like 3 CCTs in there, and you're like, okay, like obviously, like no one cares, but because we did, you may not know this. The thing about back when it was called Premier Major Minor, and you made that video,
yeah,
that's why it changed.
Oh, fair enough.
Fair enough. S tier, A tier. B-tier,
yeah, if people don't know, that's actually also one reason why it's not just complaining when I do it. Like on By the Numbers, for example, loads of industry people like ESL used to watch that. And I can tell you they have changed, like how they've done like seedings and things like that based on if you make good points. The problem is, though, I will just push back on one thing with the Valve thing, which is, even though you are totally correct in everything you say, I will just explain it this way, though. That ranking, how it began, was so insanely bad. That is like Valve was like, hey, I've done an art exhibit. And you're like, all you did is pull your pants down and shit all over the wall. And they're like, yeah, so what's wrong with that? And you go, try using a pencil. And you're like, but they are using pencils now, so they're starting to get proper artwork. It's like, well, you are right, technically, but they also did start the stupidest way possible.
Well,
and the worst thing about that, and by the way,
you says you can't polish a turd, but it has been proven you can polish a turd.
But here's the problem, mate. The real joke is this. I'll loop it back in. They actually, unironically, should get people like you who have worked with Wikipedia to tell them how to do these fucking rankings. Because what I hate is this. It's the notion that you had to launch your ranking to know it didn't work, right? If people don't know, almost every time a ranking's come along, Lurpus has preempted every time these exact problems. Like when ESL made that one where it was just based on like players having the points M&Ms. If you remember, I think Lurpus pointed out at the time when like NAVI had benched like Guardian, that if like Guardian just joined with like these other benched players, they wouldn't have played a match as a team, but they'd have already had, like, the 38th best ranking in the world or something, because that was how they sit. If people don't know, like, you can do a dry run, and you can also just bring an expert and go, what do you think could go wrong with this? And then the idea is you give him the system, the formula, he puts in, like, well, what happens if a team did this? And then we can actually get ahead of it. You don't have to wait until after the fact. We can actually fix some of these before. We just need Valve, as usual, to actually, like, ask for people's help, basically. Because I feel like we could get a very sturdy ranking going. I mean, it's already
I know the most
doable.
frustrating, horrible thing ever was when they did the old RMR system, where you would play like 3 or 4 events before the major, and they would aggregate the points, and you would lose points, for making roster changes and getting penalties or whatever. They never published a public source for where those points ranking, like what the point rankings were. Ever. So Liquipedia, we had to basically reverse engineer their ranking system to give the public something to look at. We had, the table where it showed like who would qualify, who would not qualify, how many points have you lost, and we had to completely engineer that from scratch because Valve never published us. And we did eventually actually get into contact with them, but there would be times where we would message them and we're like, Valve, we think you're interpreting this. We think you've interpreted this rule wrong. This shouldn't, based on the actual wording of your rule book, it should be this. And then they're just like, oh yeah, good point, and just change it. So like they will change stuff, but it's also frustrating because like with that as an example, the way you qualified to the major was opaque, and you couldn't actually see which teams were qualifying to the major if Liquipedia didn't make the table. And like honestly, I'm an idiot. I just write articles about CS teams disbanding or whatever. The actual developers at Liquipedia, like,
I mean, whoever does it, yeah, sure. But the point is, there's people who already can do all this. And,
like,
yeah.
Code the tables, and they long
they
nights
could easily do it.
Like,
yes,
but it's like they are getting better by making it like transparent and open source, and not having us smash our heads against a table because we can't tell if like a team's qualified into the major. But
oh, and by the way, to bring it back, the other thing as well that you said there that I also agree with. Look, I get why for Thunderpick they want just the best teams in the world and they want to have it now, and they don't want people to not participate who are on FaZe, for example, because it's a huge team, and I'm sure it encourages the betting, etc. But actually, the other thing that's sad is I agree, it has also replaced essentially Tier 2 LANs. And the reason that sucks is, even though the Tier 2 LAN wouldn't have this lineup, like some of those teams, maybe FaZe wouldn't attend, right? I don't care. Those Tier 2 LANs had real value because they actually did give you like some simulacrum of what a real LAN tournament's like. So the difference is, if some like Tier 2 team went to that LAN like DreamHack, that was, if people don't know, there never was any real surprises in Counter-Strike. Like, you're all going to be like, when Fury, Vanguard came out of nowhere, they didn't. They played in all the Tier 2 circuit. You can go watch all the LANs. What they actually did was gradually creep up and then break out at a big Tier 1 LAN. But the point is, if you didn't watch Tier 2, you didn't know they existed. But we did need that Tier 2 scene to build them all up and figure out who was actually good. If people don't know, even some of the ones in the online era, like the fucking Mad Lions of the world, came up through the end of that LAN circuit. Forza, all those teams did. So it's actually just a bummer, unfortunately, when you don't have that, because the online cop also doesn't work in that way. Like, you don't get any LAN experience from that. You're still just playing from your bedroom, like the old meme with the Coca-Cola and your chair and all that jazz. So to me, it's okay as a filler, like you say, or I get why for the company they want to do it. It's totally fine. It's great entertainment. I just don't want it to be considered part of like CS history for me, because let's be real, everyone is just going to delete the online era. We all did that already, basically. Like, so we have to do it with this too.
Well, sitting here with the comfort of my Coca-Cola in my bedroom, what I will say is, like, think about, for example, like NC's. NC's most important formative event to becoming a real team was DreamHack Winter 2018. If they didn't win that event, winner of coming second place, I can't remember anymore, but that was like their event where they like finally hit the ground running. I think they beat like MSL's Optic at some point, and you're like,
oh, you mean Star Series? Like, it was Star Series
Pardon?
at the end. It was Star Series Season 6 at the end of 2018.
No, there was the same matchup at a DreamHack Winter.
Oh, fair
too.
Enough. Okay.
Because that was one also with Bravado, the South African guys.
Oh, could have been DreamHack Winter then. Okay.
And then Existence Galaxy, the team with Barbar on it. But that was like those two small lands were the formative events with them, and I don't think they would have been able to go on and do what they did at the major without that. And now you see these teams are playing like CCT online. They're playing like 6 CCT online events at once, and it's like, is that really a valuable experience for these teams? And they're playing Swiss, which is not as a format we use at Common Lands. They're playing 5 or 6 matches a day, not something we do on LAN. So it's like completely. There's it's a simulacrum. There's no relationship to what real CS is like.
By the way, if anyone does go back, it was like over a year ago now when we did that episode with Heku. She actually nailed it, Maui. She pointed out that the problem with the CCT tournament was they immediately sort of threw the concept out the window that it was for regional teams and tier 2 and they just go for the biggest names ever and just ram them in all the... Because the maddest thing about that is, dude, it doesn't even make any sense what division you're in. I've seen teams like CCT North, and then it'll be like, I mean, obviously I don't want to talk about my house, but I've seen like Brazilian teams in that shit, none of them make any sense. They like every fucking project. It was a good idea, then they sold out, right?
At one point, MIBR was playing, I think, CCT North Europe, CCT
there you go.
Central Europe,
it was.
There you go.
CCT South Europe all at the same time.
I mean, spoiler, they're from the fucking Southern Hemisphere. And they're putting CCT North. Like, you know,
they're not in Europe.
It's too good, isn't it? I know. It's too good.
Because the problem with that is it's all run by different tournament operators.
Yes.
So for them, the incentive is, why
You
wouldn't
want the
I
biggest
invite
name,
the
yeah,
best
of
teams I
course.
can get?
Yeah.
Why would I invite,
Yeah.
the three? If I'm CCT South Europe, am I just stuck to only invite like Albanian, Kosovar, and Serbian teams until I die? No, I want MIBR. Like,
Right, what is your ugly point then? Oh, go on.
Well, just one last little thing about like the CCT and MIBR and all that stuff like that. If you actually look at the Valve rankings as they are most recently updated, this MIBR is the second highest standing team in the Americas region. They're above Furia, they're above Liquid, they're behind Complexity, who is just way above everybody else. But yeah, they just have so many points because they've just won random prize money from random tournaments that no one really is watching. But yeah, okay. Wait, who's ugly? Is
It's Jeff now. It's your ugly point.
The mini so
This
with
ties
the
into it
CCT
though.
thing,
Actually, does segue.
I'm still mad about CCT too because Brazil is up to CCT South America Series 12. Europe is like 8, 9, 10. They've run 10 events there. Do you know how many NA got? 4.
One, I'm gonna guess. Or 4.
4. And then they said, and we asked, and we're like, why? Like Dusty Us, we went to the TO and we're like, why did they, is there going to be the next 4 you promised? Because each region, I think, was supposed to have like around 8. And they're like, oh, yeah, there just wasn't enough, interest in the project. There wasn't enough viewership, So, yeah, you just only get 4 events. And it's obviously, and that affects our ratings, too. Because, like you said, like, MIBR is viewed as, like, the best team in the Americas because they're just running around Europe playing random CCT events.
They're winning like Brazilian CCTs, and they're winning Europe, or they're getting money from South American CCTs.
Yeah. They honestly, like a team like Zero Tenacity from the Balkans should just go to Brazil and play like one of their CCTs and be like, see, that's how it feels. Like, but so my ugly point for this is another sort of NA focused topic is the demise of Evil Geniuses. I think based on what Richard Lewis has reported and what kind of we've all seen and what we all expected, it seems fairly obvious to say at this point that Evil Geniuses will be exiting CS and they will be releasing their lineup. And at that perspective alone, losing an organization in North America is obviously a bad thing. Now we're going to only really have Liquid kind of and Complexity and then all the smaller orgs. But if you just think about all the players they wasted and all the opportunities they wasted and all the money they wasted and everything they did wrong over the entire span of the last 3 years, there's so many stories of things that organization did wrong and times they should have zigged where they zagged and individual examples of what they wasted. I could be here for hours recounting each thing they did wrong, and for like a European, like when FaZe goes out of business or whatever, it's bad. But those guys will land on their feet. When a team like Evil Geniuses, ruins themselves and falls apart, that can like set NA back by years. And it's just horrible to think about all the players that have sort of been negatively held back in their careers because of them. For example, something that was brought up to me recently, just as sort of a microcosm of everything wrong with the way Evil Geniuses manage their CS division, is there's this player in North America called Clasia. He played for one of the Evil Geniuses Academy team, and for years, I think Mauisnake, you can attest to this too, he's been viewed as like a potential star or a journeyman player who has the potential to be great. And he was signed to one of the Evil Genius Academy teams, and it's been known, like it's an open secret, not even a secret, that he's suffered with like attitude problems, commitment issues, normal things that affect young players. And there's no way EG couldn't have known this bringing him in. So you'd think they'd like set him up with like a sports psychologist and like have like a mentor figure and work on his idiosyncrasies. No, they just cut him a month after he joined because he didn't do good at a boot camp. And now he's sort of stuck in the cycle of random ECL teams. And if you sort of think about the way they didn't give the attention to the players that needed attention or help bring up the players that needed to be brought up, that's what they did to every single player in their program, and that's what they did to the entire NA scene. And now they're cutting tail and running and sort of leaving NA a dumpster fire. And it's really ugly for it's done to the NA scene cumulatively over the last 3 years.
I have mixed feelings on the EG exit from the North American space. The thing that you mentioned with the fact that there were so many things that were managed poorly is something that I think everybody was privy to for the duration of their tenure. And like I do think that with like the way that they handled all the academy rosters, I know that they set them up at least with salary and coaches. I don't know what else like they really even should have done other than maybe probably just don't even get those rosters. Like to me when they actually first had that whole party astronauts roster along with their main one, to me it actually felt very like the ulterior motive to that was that you're going to take party astronauts out of the America's RMR because it would be a conflict of interest and they couldn't enter the America's RMR. Yet in my eyes, party astronauts had just about the same likelihood of qualifying for the major as your main EG roster, because at the time that was like when it was like Ben Lee and Ponalone and people like DJ, John G. I'm missing the fifth player and I feel bad for him for not remembering his name. And Viz, and Viz. And I felt like that team was probably just as likely to qualify as like the automatic Stewie Breeze roster, which was also floundering too. Like they kind of were meeting in the middle of like party astronauts were the top of tier 2 and EG was the bottom of the barrel in tier 1. And so I thought it was kind of a devious move that to actually take them under their wing when I didn't necessarily feel like they were going to actually foster their talent. I think it felt like they were maybe just trying to purchase them as soon as they could so that they knew that if we want to promote one of these guys, we're not going to have to pay any kind of buyout fee. So it felt like a long-term thing. It didn't feel like something to me where it was like about fostering talent. It felt more like this is going to be an investment and it's going to pay off for us in the future. And it obviously didn't really bear any kind of fruit like that. Like I don't think anybody from that party astronauts roster got promoted at any point in time.
They did not, never.
Right. And I wanted that to happen because I thought Ponalone definitely deserved the call up over Wiz. Whatever. I mean, in terms of beyond just like the little micro elements here, the whole macro picture for me is, this is going to actually hurt some of the people that were employed by EG. And I'm talking just the players, like players and coaches who were making a living salary because they were playing underneath this banner. Even though we know that like it wasn't run very well, literally the injection of funds probably kept a couple of these names in the space that otherwise maybe would have gone to Valorant a little bit earlier. That being said, none of them have really shown that they're going to actually make any huge dent in the tier 1 space just yet. But like it was nice to hold out that kind of hope. I'm kind of just glad that this sort of parasite that has just been attached by the torso to everybody in North America, where it's like you just knew that this was probably going to end up just falling off and just dying, and you're going to have this big blister on your side. And that's kind of now what it feels like with NA, where we're just like we were devoting some like just mental effort and life resources to like trying to do mental gymnastics at some point to be like, I think this EG project is good because it's putting more money in this space, but in terms of actually what it accomplished, it was nothing. There was nothing really to be happy about by the end. Well, and you kind of even feel like a
dickhead too sometimes because you're constantly criticizing this roster that had in all senses should not be competing at tier 1. I don't think they're ready and they need some roster changes. And so you're constantly like, Junior can't play tier 1. You're like, oh, Hex and Walco, and you feel bad for talking to these players like this, but EG almost set them up on this pedestal. This is the evil genius's main team. These are our expectations for them. And like that's been the hardest thing for me too, is like when you criticize these players, there are people who are like in your local scene, and it's like, listen, I'm criticizing you because you're an evil geniuses player, not because of who you are actually as like a player. You're just stuck in this weird situation where there's like these expectations hoisted on top of you that you don't really deserve to have because evil geniuses have made such bad roster moves. Like maybe 3 of these guys with 2 Europeans could have been a really good team, and we'll never find out. And the way they've died over the last 3 or 4 months, people forget that only 4 or 5 months ago they were trying to sign a complete European roster, the one with Zorte, Electronic, Jax,
Elige. There was a potential on it too, yeah.
And the reason why that failed is because no one wants to play for Evil Geniuses. They even took a brand that's sacred for NA and completely ruined it in their exit. And they would have, I'm sure if they actually got this European roster, they would have fired the academy teams even quicker than they did now. And it would have brought the whole thing to a conclusion. One other thing that I think with Evil Genius's death that I've been thinking a lot about recently is how does this affect the legacy of someone like Valen? So Valens wins the major with Cloud9, and so therefore he's a hero of NA as a sort of coach figure. But from what we understand, he's been a key figure and a key decision maker in the system in Evil Geniuses, and it's failed completely. Like, this is a massive, uncalculable failure. He's basically, the choices he's helped to make and the decisions he's been behind have seemingly brought this team to ruin. So I'm thinking too, not just Evil Geniuses dying, not just losing the salary lifeline, not just, all the other effects. Valen's reputation and legacy has kind of been disturbed by his time with Evil Geniuses. And we still know he's a brilliant, smart guy, but after this, is he going to be so jaded by the experience of Evil Geniuses that he doesn't come back to coaching or even working in CS anymore? He could go on to, Valorant or League of Legends or go back to, NASA or whatever. And there's so many different strings to pull here, but it's just like Evil Geniuses is the typhoon of destruction in an A.
The problem with this move is, like, in theory, I actually should, no matter what, say it's bad for the space because it was a giant org that had, like, lots of money, it had legacy. But actually, I don't think it is because, quite frankly, right now, the one thing they had was money. Like, they've ruined all the respect and the legacy. They haven't had anything for the last few years. So the joke now is, even the success of 2019 is so far in the past, and because it's before the divide of the online era, it may as well not have happened. Like, that now, to a modern fan who's only watched the last 2 years, that's like talk about NIP 87 and 0. No one gives a shit, mate. That's not going to make anyone a fan of NIP today, that the 87 and 0 is a different lineup. And no fan today goes, I'm an EG fan because they won ESL New York 2019 with totally different players and a totally different scenario and everything was different. All the pieces were different. So, quite frankly, all they had now was money. And quite frankly, they don't have the money anymore, boys. That's why it's not just that they fired the team. Like, essentially, everyone's fired with an EG. Like, all the executive people, the people making all the giant salaries, flying business class around the world, people who've done all sorts of crazy moves, loads of people are fired. And I've heard they had to offset millions in salary for where they're at financially. So basically, as far as I can tell, they wouldn't have been able to run the big EG rosters anyway. Like, it does make the main EG squad criminal because people know the rumours. I've heard they're true. People like Breeze and what's his name? Cirque. They were still making massive salaries for most of that dog shit period where the team could never win a game on land. So they did waste even the money they did have. But the point is, there isn't money anymore now anyway. As far as I can tell, you'd be on a budget roster because the joke is, if anything, it's League of Legends where you'd put your money, where they'd actually become like the number one team. And even in League of Legends, they had to completely cut most of the roster and go with budget players who just took very, very little salary. So that, in that sense, I'm not really that sad that they left. And then you look at what they did do. The only actual upside in theory was the whole PR thing of we have 3 teams, we have the 2 other squads, we have the astronauts and except they, like you said, they never did it. If it ever actually was a real thing where the idea was we're just going to find the 1 or 2 players who will then become the replacement for the not so good EG players from the era I'm talking about, and then you mix them together, you get the European IGL. By the way, if you'd have done it right, EG, you'd be in the mix to get a Cadian or someone now. You could get a Snappy now, and then you put them with, like, let's say you keep Automatic and, I don't know, Breeze, maybe he's the one who works out, and then you get, like, a younger player comes in, then you get you can see how it could have come together as a real squad that could do something. Meanwhile, you look at the actual results they had. If people don't know, because they got to play the fucking, like, Oceanic team, Rooster, congrats, they got a second LAN best of 3 win in 2023. If people don't know, even with that dog shit win, they went, I think I looked it up while you were talking, they went 2-15 in LAN best of 3 series. And even at this Pro League, when they beat Rooster, they came second to last. One of the things I think I made a very good point of in my video was, holy shit, is this team, like, bad in every respect? They don't win the maps, they don't win the games. They, in these partner leagues that they're just in because the team paid, they always come last to second to last. It's crazy. They can't even, put it this way, everyone knows my feelings about Fallen. He still fucking tripped over at the end and almost went to the final of that blast where they, like, lost to Vitality, like 19-17 and OT or Heroic, whichever one it was. I think it was Heroic. Yeah, like, they almost were in they almost fucked around and went to the final of that tournament. EG has never come close. Like, they're not even on the window looking in at, they're like fucking hearing about a report of it over a fucking wireless radio in a cafe 2 miles down the road from the event. Like, they're not even vaguely touching it. So, and that's just pathetic. Like, that's just a systematic failure. And that's just recently. I'll run down the greatest hits. So they had Zeus as their coach and who wanted to be involved and who had a bunch of massive players, go watch my interviews, that he could have got to join. Like, by the way, this wasn't just recently. I've heard back in the day they were going to get NAF during the Zeus era and he was going to leave Liquid because he hasn't actually fucked with some of those players. Like, if people don't know, he tried to leave Liquid this first year he joined. It's never really been his vibe. They're a bit too try-hard for him. So he wanted to always be with the EG boys. That was always like his vibe of people. He wanted to be with people like Breeze and Circus. So you could have had NAF twice, by the way. You could have had him last year, and then you could have had him like 2 or 3 years ago. Then you fucked around with Zeus to the extent he left. Then you had Kassad wanted to join your project. You didn't. By the way, since you didn't sign him, I think you've won like 3 LAN best of 3 series, and that was like a year and a half ago at this point in time. Like, you almost couldn't have made a worse fucking move because whoever you did sign didn't do anything. Then you could have had Valde was going to join, and he, in fact, by the way, turned down joining Astralis thinking he was joining EG. Didn't do that move. You think by the way, he was only joining to be a support player. You think he wouldn't have shored that team up like immediately? Also, mega attitude as a player. Then you go, like you say, the one where they could have made the Russian super team plus Elige. I've heard Elige was up for that. That's why the deal was he was going to join. And I've even heard those other players wanted to join, and everyone was going to do it. And I'll probably do a bigger thing about this future, but I've basically heard they just didn't do their due diligence on certain things about the deal. And so, embarrassingly, EG themselves at the last minute had to just basically tell everyone, sorry, we're not doing any of this deal at all. And that's why everyone went back, and Elige went to Complexity, and the other players went to Cloud9, and Zorti ended up on whoever isn't he back on Fours or something? Who does he play for now, Zorti?
Great question.
Maybe he's on like BetBoom or something.
BetBoom.
There you go, BetBoom. There you go. Right, so he obviously went to a smaller team too. So they fucked everyone on that one too, by the way. Because the other thing that's criminal about these moves is I hate people who essentially tell someone like, you're in, don't worry, and then they turn down other offers. By the way, loop this back to the beginning of the episode. Never do that if you're a pro player. Until you have signed a contract that they also have signed, you are not in that team. Literally, until that moment, you should maintain all options open and tell the other teams, I am going to join this team if they give me a deal, but I am still open to joining your team. Because if you fuck yourself on that one, there are so many like shuffles where you'll just get lost. You'll get left on the outside, and like the musical chairs scenario, when the music stops, you won't have a chair. You'll be on fucking BetBoom instead of EG or fucking Cloud9, whoever you could have been on at that point in time. And then the last thing to say is I don't even give them that much credit also for the teams thing, because I'll spin it the other way. I do agree that those players got salary. They got to sort of like have almost like it's almost like they got to pretend and LARP that they were a pro player. But the main problem, and this is the most criminal thing about that, is because they never were going to put them on the main team. If I had to say functionally the biggest impact they had on those players was ensure they could never qualify to a major in an era when the RMR was wide open for Americans. Like someone like Party Astronauts, I'll tell you right now, I think they would have qualified more than EG did. EG, I think, qualified once or twice tops. I think they could have made it. Like there's a chance they could have grabbed that last spot, especially when it was going like 6 teams deep or whatever, Maui. Like they could have grabbed that. You can even best of one lock through Swiss and do that. I actually think that's the saddest thing, because here's the problem. If you're those players now, I'll tell you, in Counter-Strike, players are hard-headed. They don't really look at your game when you're a rival and go, oh, he's pretty good actually, we should sign him. You have to beat them actually at the lands. You have to go to the RMR or the major, pop off, and then here's the thing, they're followers like all of us. They see that and then go, I think this other guy is good. Cypher, yeah, I've always rated him personally. They just do that like we all do when you see them do it at the LAN. So actually the best thing that ever could have happened to those players would not be on EG. If Party Astronauts could run it back and have like 3 cracks at a major or something, dude, if they make one and one of those players plays well, I think we're having a totally different discussion about them. Whereas, as you say, the joke is, guys, aside from you who are in the NA scene, I don't think European fans could even name like 2 players from each lineup. I think even 2 might be pushing it, dude. Like maybe they know the Paul logo. That might be it, though. You know what I mean? The other team, they know. The joke is the other team even had Stanislaw, and people didn't even know he played CS still. People thought, like, I think people who are Europeans think Russian Stanislaw were retired. I don't think they know they were still playing the whole time. That's how badly they also publicized those teams.
Thing is, so Stanislaw did nothing on Evil Geniuses, like the Evil Geniuses Academy team. I think he was on EG Black for a while, and now he's back in the NA scene with a new group of players, and they're about to be signed most likely tomorrow to new org. Okay. And the team's like, and Forsaken, he's on Forsaken, and that team has been getting wins over like Imperial, getting wins over Liquid, doing all this. Why couldn't EG figure that out with Stanislaw on Evil Geniuses. He had to go and be unemployed playing for $0.00 to finally have his insight trusted. Like, I've been someone who's very down on Stanislaw ever since he got kicked from the Evil Geniuses main roster initially, but I've had to like reassess my understanding of Stanislaw because it seems like he's actually doing a good job at building rosters and sort of reinventing himself as an IGL. What conditions precluded him from doing that in Evil Geniuses? Did they not listen to him? Did they not, take his expertise? Did they, say, okay, EG Black is set in stone. You're just here as a fifth player. Shut up, do your job. And then, one final cherry on top for this that I've been thinking about with how they've been handling players from a mental, emotional standpoint. We hear about in Dota 2 the thing with, or League of Legends rather. Correct me if I'm, or Danny, is that League of Legends?
Yeah.
League of Legends, Danny. Hey, you know what other player they had that had unique mental health needs on Evil Geniuses and we haven't heard from forever? Can you guess the name?
Stewie 2K.
Starts with an O.
Okay. With an O.
O-B.
Oh, Obo, right. Okay.
Obo. And we've never seen him again, and we've never seen him again since, except for one stream where he seemed like he was in deep mental distress. Did Evil Geniuses play a role?
Oh, by the way, that's something I hadn't even thought of. I can reveal this now. As far as I can tell, like I was going to say, I didn't mention even the Stewie move, which actually set off the bad era of CS before they had good players. Like the Stewie move, as far as I can tell, first of all, they were told not only by the coaching staff they hired, but everyone else, don't do this move. Like that guy who you're thinking of was years ago when he was really good. Like he isn't in the right headspace. They signed him and they said internally, he is a superstar and he will be the carrier of this team, which was a nonsense idea. But then also, like you're saying, I've also heard that it's potentially the case people inside EG didn't want them to sign the Oppo guy, that they told him what you're saying. Like, bro, he's had problems in call. Like, there's a reason why. Like, he's not. And basically, they thought it was like a PR win or something stupid and just signed him. But as you say, it doesn't seem like they helped him in any way. They just signed him and let him just wither on the vine. Like, as far as I can tell, he just disappeared while he was in EG, right?
Well, Obo is like one of the weirdest, like, sad stories in NA. He's like, I know there's like, I can't think of an analog. There was one German player, I believe, who was sort of in a similar situation.
The guy Troubley, you mean, back in the day?
Troubley? Yeah, Troubley. Where he was someone who was viewed as like a good player, with a potential bright future, but like mental health issues.
And crucially, like this, acted out in weird ways that were like uncomfortable
and acted
for
out
people.
in weird ways that were uncomfortable to people. Ends up leaving the team and is never basically heard from again. And you have to wonder. We can't. It's sort of. I don't like. I'm not blaming. I'm not blaming him for his mental health issues. But if he either A, wasn't on EG, or was B, on a team that had better support networks, could things have turned out differently? And it's like all those. You think about like every single instance of where EG did something wrong over the last 3 years for NACS, and it adds up. I know someone put out a tweet a couple days ago where they talked about like EG's overall presence in CS. During their time in NA, with just NA players alone, they had signed like 30 players from NA over the course of this whole period of time.
Okay.
From like from the start, from when they signed NRG to the very end.
Yeah.
And most of those guys are not in better places than when EG picked them up.
Okay.
Like, that's not good. That's fucked up.
Right, Maui, what is your bad point?
Ugly point.
Ugly point. I mean, nowadays, no one knows, which is it.
Point before he changed it the last minute,
Yeah. Mine is it's kind of like the saga of the drip feed of Valve employees outing that
I love this
they
shit,
are
mate. I love it.
so incompetent on so many different levels. I think that what needs to preface this whole thing is that in January of this year, Valve had a YouTube video about them saying like only 10,000 people are capable of working at Valve in the world. And then we see the tweets of not just one, but two Valve employees between John McDonald and I just clicked off of the other one. Shoot. But John McDonald is the most recent case of it, where he said the line about best analysis I've seen of subtick movement here, worth a read if you have concerns about movement. And then he said, most but not all of the problems around subtick movement right now stem from CL show pos not understanding subtick. It reports values on tick boundaries, which makes them look inconsistent. The movement curves have been shifted to offset from a tick. Either way, I mean, Launders has gone to town on this stuff in terms of just showing that if you go for the same jumps repeatedly, you'll have you can input the exact same commands and the game will output different sort of moves for your character, and that's just so unacceptable that the movement to get onto, for example, the boxes to jump up to Palace from when you come out of A ramp on Mirage, you can't do the same thing over and over again. It's like 1 out of, I'd say, 4 times you're going to actually jump on those boxes with what used to be in CSGO the perfect sequence to just make sure you're getting onto it every single time. So the fact that he says that he John McDonald just kind of like doubles down on it. Like he's like saying that, let me see. Okay. So he says like, that case is indeed inconsistent. Is there a case where that is relevant to gameplay? And this is supposed to be a guy that's like working on the game every single day, and he doesn't recognize that there is literally a case where if you just put in some commands, you're not going to actually move the same way. And in a competitive shooter, that's the whole point of the game. That's why we still celebrate games like Quake to this day. That's why a lot of people actually, for a while, were celebrating Apex. I know that they've had some weird interactions lately with the game, but the movement in it was so pleasing that the way you could scale the map and everything like that, you could get around so quickly. And if you mastered the art of movement, you could add some depth to your game beyond just the mechanics of shooting itself. And so he said it could be made consistent, but it would cost FPS that I suspect users would rather have. I think that this right there is an admission that subtick is supposed to try to, it is actually causing inconsistencies, but it is actually for the sake of trying to give everybody slightly higher frames per second. And yet there's another guy from Valve that says that what everybody should be doing is just putting FPS max at 120.
That was the guy called Fletcher Dunn, it was like Z Post Factor on Twitter. Yeah, basically he said like if you keep it 120 FPS cap, you won't notice the fluctuation. So he actually said, and this is the real problem, Maui, the last line is he put, I just can't bring myself to prioritize that. It's the way he phrased it's that line that triggered everyone.
It triggered me.
It's literally like the human eye can't see over 60 FPS bullshit again. Like,
yeah.
Like he's like, guys, I don't understand the everyone should be playing 16 by 9. I don't understand why people are playing 4 by 3 still. The game's clearly meant for 16 by 9. It's like, yes, but I'm in the beta, like someone was like, if you just set it to FPS or FPS max 400, like the game performs like 20 times better, even though you were already hitting that frame goal. It's just like, I love Valve has like some people at Valve have been trying, but other people at Valve have just been saying dumb shit like on the street. Like in the office, smart. On the streets, dumb.
Yeah. I think like there's been a weird disconnect with Valve lately and some of the additions they've had to games. I think that some people almost just seem to be forgetting and their incompetencies there. Like people talk about Dota being the poster child for what they're like, if they put a lot of their effort into a game, how good it can look. But I remember that a few of my my friends that were playing Dota at a very high level, like the immortal ranked level, when neutral items came out, which were literally RNG based items that you would spawn in the jungle if you kill a neutral creature, but they could be so game changing. So many people in the competitive Dota space were like, this is a blight on the game. Like, why are you adding RNG to a game that practically speaking has so little RNG? Yeah, like your attack strength can vary and there's crit damage, but it's like with a pseudo RNG actually, where that is just pure RNG. And so it's like over time, and the longer that Valve moves away from the core gameplay of what made Dota great and what made Counter-Strike great, it's like then they're starting to just out themselves for not understanding what made us all fall in love with these games to begin with is consistency, and the fact that we don't want randomness. We want things to just feel the same every single time. And I feel like I said it like so long ago, and in a hot take point made as soon as this subtick came out, and as soon as I was playing the closed beta, I was like, I couldn't tell you all the technical reasons why this isn't right, but based off of feel and some of those early like bro science things that were coming out on the Reddit, this just doesn't look like it's built to last still. And it's just that the fact is that they are so unwilling to just accept the fact that Valorant has created a 128 tick environment that is played by millions of people every single month, and people don't give a shit if the 128 tick is slightly affecting their frame rate because they made a game that can function on all of these computers in Indonesia and like third world countries, and it doesn't even matter. Like people don't care because they want 128 tick. They hate getting shot behind walls, and the Valve devs still want to stand on this subtick bullshit that is clearly causing inconsistencies. John McDonald is practically admitting in this tweet that the tick boundaries are making them inconsistent. It is making movement inconsistent, but we want to make sure that it's that people are getting better frames. People don't care. People would rather have consistent gameplay than frames. We know that with Valorant now, and now they're just so unwilling to accept that.
Can I say, people with bad computers, I don't care about you, unfortunately. It's like I would rather have a game be optimized towards like the modern new standard than have a dev be held back by being like, I want to make sure everyone has an acceptable frame rate, even the person who hasn't upgraded their computer since CS:GO came out. And it's just like, unfortunately, just like sports advance in terms of the technology needed to play the game at the top level, in terms of like the pads and the equipment and the hockey sticks or whatever, or the rubber for the basketball shoes. In the same way, your computers need to get better. I'd rather have the game require better computers to run at its best and have the game be built around that, because I know they'll be using the best computers at esports event, that have a game every Joe Schmo can play with their 2070 and their i5 from 2014 or whatever. I feel like devs should future proof their games more than making it able to work before. Like, ultimately, I think CS:GO was very accessible when it first came out, but I think nowadays, with the way computer technology is going, they need to have Source 2 and CS2 cater towards the higher end.
There's a saying in like the Twitter sphere in politics, because in politics, journalism is probably like the worst it is in any field in the world, because understandably people are literally financially and like politically motivated to just skew what they write and report on through the lens of what they want to be the case, or to help certain people and to hurt other people. And so there's a saying online that goes like, however much you hate journalists, it's not enough, because essentially it's like, if you really knew how bad it was and what they were doing, you'd despise them. Like, if you even knew that like they're not accidentally putting that story out that's wrong, that they then have to go, sorry, they just know that like, when you get the first one out there viral, when you then correct the error you made, it's seen by like a tenth of the same people. So essentially you get to have your cake and eat it. You get to put the false info out there for political motivations, but then you also get to like retain the integrity of being like, oh, really sorry about that, will never happen again. So basically, along similar lines, you're now all getting a sense of, that's weird, why was Thorin so hostile to Valve devs the whole time I've seen his videos? You're getting a sense of why. I've met these people. I've asked them the questions that the floms of the world don't, because they're too busy fucking glazing them for getting invited to their headquarters. I ask them stuff that I know they don't know the answer to. Like what do you think it's like when two CZs stand around a corner and one person comes there? It's like, what do you mean? Like, well, if you're balancing the game, you'd have to look at like how the team could use the weapon. Like, it's not just one gun against one gun. It's a 5v5 game. Dude, you say that to them, their eyes glaze over, and it's like, it's fucking, like I always say, it's like you're trying to show a dog a card trick. Like, it's not getting it. There's nothing going on there. So the saying is, here's the one for Valve. However much you underestimate the level the Valve devs understand CS, you can't do it enough. You can't do it enough. And this is why, by the way, the one thing that saves Valve is that they don't have any radio communication. It's just silence the whole time. They don't do things where you can ask them, why did you do that patch? You don't have press conferences where Mnmzzz and people like that can go and say, hey, what's going on with this move and what's the future of the game? You can't do that. Maybe every now and then you can get an interview. And notice the interview wasn't on hltv.org, the #1 Counter-Strike site of all time. It was on PC Gamer, where the plebs, by the way, the kind of idiot who's going to play CS then is the guy, like, I used to play this when I was 15, maybe I'll boot it up with the boys. Wow, look at this shotgun. Like, that's not a guy who's ever going to know about pro play. But that's where they choose to do their interview. That's who they choose to communicate with. So what I would say is this, is these guys, it's only because they don't tell you what they actually think and why they're doing it that you guys can reverse engineer like a plausible reason that isn't stupid. It's what, if they did what Riot does, and I'll give props to Riot for this. Riot now, by the way, when they do patch changes, have a color coding system that tells you if it's meant to be a buff or a nerf, and they explain what they're doing. Like, they give a context of like, we're removing like this ability by 20 damage, and then they'll say something like, in the hopes of like, they'll have like, even then someone from it's actually a famous caster, but he's on the dev team now, Freak, a former like massive LCS caster. He then does a video where he explains also what they're thinking, what they're trying to do, what they do. If Valve devs did that, the whole discussion's over. You'd all despise them as much as I do, because these boneheaded opinions they're giving here are embarrassing. Like, you touched on it there, Mnmzzz, but I'm going to make it more explicit. If you remember, the real meme one was people used to say it was 24 FPS because it was based on like how cinema reels work. People used to say the human eye can barely see more than 24 FPS. Obviously, with monitors, because we all had to upgrade from 60 hertz, they then took that to mean 60 FPS famously, which also, by the way, hertz does not equal FPS, but that's a classic another one. Now, here's what's mad about them saying that, Mnmzzz. They're only a game dev on an esports game. It's fucking Counter-Strike. Counter-Strike. That take is something that for real you hear from like your 70-year-old boomer granddad who never touched a computer, who just read in like, you know, a technical magazine, like, you know, a human eye can technically just see that. Like, he's taken like a piece of trivia. But this is a Valve dev. Is like, that's the 120 FPS comment. The way he said he won't prioritize it makes it sound like a 20 FPS one. That makes you sound like a guy who doesn't even understand, not even beyond the casual level, what these games are like. Like, you're thinking this is just like you put an Xbox in front of your kid on Christmas. He can see it looks on the TV. Why do you need a monitor? TV works fine. You know, like, that's the level you're on, except you're the game dev. Like, you're supposed to be the fucking architect from like Matrix Reloaded or whatever, who like knows everything about the game and how it all works. The joke is they don't. They're fucking noobs. I always say this. You know, even when people tell me, yeah, but Thorin, you know, when CSGO came out, it was pretty bad and then it improved. Did any of these devs work on CSGO? If the answer is no, why are you bringing that up? What would the relevance be? Well, it has no relevance. Everyone acts like Valve is this monolith. It's not. It's a bunch of people who, as far as I can tell, every few years, a bunch of them just quit and get replaced by the next line of noob who goes, oh, brilliant, I'm working on CS, and then comes out and says some dumbass shit like this, like, who needs more than 120 FPS? You got phones, don't you, guys? Like, they're on that level. This is fucking mad embarrassing. That's why I've always said, I don't think these guys, it's not even that I think... They're not doing any of this maliciously. They're just incompetent, as in to do things at a professional level. I'm sure for the casuals it'll all be fine. By the way, they're probably right, M&Ms. For casuals, subtick probably doesn't matter. A casual would never figure out what Launders and his mates since KZ figured out about the Apex, and they wouldn't care, actually. As long as it vaguely works, it's okay, that's fine. I will say, the notion they're going to imply, like FPS is at a premium, after you just made CS2, you mean CSGO with J.J. Abrams lens flares that no one can play on the PCs, that we all had 5 minutes ago that had max FPS on CSGO. Somehow I don't really believe you care about my FPS, you disingenuous motherfucker. You've already essentially... By the way, when someone like Rops, who essentially is like a genius about how CSGO works, has to ask someone else in the scene to use remote access and set his PC up so it has normal FPS, I think you might have fucked up the way the game works, mate. If even he can't just go through the drop-down menu and pick a few things and have it work, you fucked it up. So the sad thing about this is this just shows you now why it's a fucking clown fiesta. Like, they're not even conceiving of the things we are. And the worst thing is, like this, they're acting like this is some debatable thing, like the FPS thing, or like, well, maybe the jump does work. No, you don't need to worry about this Valve dev. We have losers like Lauder's mates who have literally spent 15 years just jumping around a map. Like, that's actually their whole shit. They've dedicated their whole life to that, mate. They know everything about the physics of CSGO. They know exactly how many, like, they do that thing where they know, like, the qubits in the game, it can move and stuff, and, like, what the actual max... You don't need to speculate. If you just get those people, they could tell you in, like, 5 minutes what does and doesn't work. Whereas instead, like you say... Here's what's mad. Even though the Valve dev is the mega ignorant person, it's always the person who's the expert who has to like really politely approach them. Look, I know it could be the case, Valve dev, but I'd really like to just say, why is it that way around? It's the other way around. That's the expert. Ask that guy, if anything, mate.
Yeah. What he said. Good stuff. But I don't know. It's like everything you said was right about like Valve being really dumb, and being dumb and not really listening to the experts. But like I kind of said earlier, it's weird. Like on one hand, that's all true, but on the other hand, like they are fixing things, which is like, it almost feels like there's two separate like teams working at Valve. There's like the people who give public statements and make these sort of dumb comments, and they're the ones who listen to public feedback. And then there's like a secret cloistered actual dev community who, you know, has like earmuffs on, who have blindfolds around their eyes, and they just fix and code the game. And I think, you know, we can say CS2 is better than when it was at launch because they've put out, I think, something like a patch every two or 3 days since the game launched. And the game, is much better, but I think by the end of the year it'll be in a really good space, but I don't know like what the future of CS2 will hold. It's very hard to sort of suss out what Valve's sort of vision for this game is. When they made that comment in the PC Gamer interview where they're like, oh, we're thinking of adding new weapons at some point, the revolver flashbacks.
Oh, and by the way, I quoted this. No one else seemed to pick up on this one. They implied Dust 2 is the best map ever in Counter-Strike. There's your experts right there. You do know that is the most casual take possible to have. Like, that is the take someone who didn't play it since they were 15 has about, like, CS 1.5. It's like, Dust 2's brilliant. Like, you do know the whole pro scene. I'm like the only motherfucker who would have kept Dust 2. Everyone else in the pro scene's like, good, it's gone, it's dead. I hope it never comes back. It's a dog shit. Everyone in the whole pro scene, like, that's like one of the few, like, universal opinions that seems to be out there. So it just shows that they're just not in touch. By the way, I've known this all along, so it's not changed my perspective. I don't, like, suddenly get pessimistic about CS2. I'm sure it'll work out in the end. It's just my point is, like, I don't think people understand, like, people think, like, some of this stuff's, like, accidental, which it is, but it's like they also never they were sort of like a blind man in the dark just stumbling around, like maybe something works out, something doesn't. So I think it's a nightmare personally.
I mean, my whole point isn't like I'm not bringing some doomerism to the future of CS2. I'm just saying that it's pretty clear from all of these communications we get in these sparse tweets from Valve employees that, like, they're not gods.
You phrased it the best way, dude. The way you phrased it is, remember, you put this as ugly, not bad. The ugly point is they just essentially outed themselves as fucking casuals. Meanwhile, they're supposed to be, we'd hope. Like, the joke is, unironically, I want them to actually have people at Valve who are like the crazy guy who knows the game for 15 years and some, like, Ropsite motherfucker who knows every alias and internet code to remove the interp or whatever. Like, I want some boffin like that. So the idea they don't have them, look, maybe they do. Maybe, like you say, maybe they're on the staff, but the idea, like, the people who are front facing trying to explain the game essentially don't know what they're talking about is a bit alarming. It's a bit disturbing, not least because it also does make a feedback loop, which is logically, why should that guy ever say anything now? Because correctly, we have all bashed the fuck up and said essentially, shut the fuck up, you idiot, what are you talking about? But now he's never going to say anything, is he? He's going to go, oh, all right, back in my corner. Bloody hell.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that's like hilarious and probably also like motivated me to even make this point is the people that act like they're just abused children that somehow, like, if they actually like raise one finger against their parents, they're just going to be beaten even harder. And it's like, these are Valve devs. Like, they're making millions every single day from case openings. Like, they're going to keep working on the game. Like, not going to just be like, nope, no more toys for you guys. It's like, okay, that just kills the cash cow for them.
Did I catch you having fun in my video game? Like, slap across the cheeks, you know? But they're also like, the community is children, but the Valve is also the children too. So it's like weird. Like, it's the kids complain, the other kids hit them, the other kids cry, and then mom comes and maybe makes like one change to make you get on the box on Mirage A site, and then it's all better.
Right, the last point of the show. I'm actually amazed that everyone's just cool with this deal. This is another thing. This is up there with the online tournament being treated as real CS that I can't even comprehend. Is everyone else just cool with FaZe winning every series fucking ever, but we all know that they are not going to keep this 5-man lineup? This is stupid as fuck. Like, this isn't even like, you know, one of those ones where it's like, you know, it wasn't working. Like, it's one thing when you have those scenarios where, you know, the team isn't working out and, like, you're going to break the team up because everyone wants to go upset with, but then you have that last LAN that, like, you qualified to, like a Blast or something, and you go, like the Imperial one, and you go, fuck it, we'll go anyway, and since there's no pressure, you play, we had a not bad result. No, this is like, essentially, they're playing like a real team. They were a real team until all this Saudi shit and / Twists wanted to go to Liquid, and until the org had to be sold and all that. As far as I know, if you just, like, change those inputs, isn't this lineup just a real team that's number one in CS2 now? And they just going, hey, let's look to the major next year. Let's try and, like, extend it. Let's try and win 2 majors out of 4 or whatever. You know, like, wouldn't they be doing it? Instead, we're watching them literally be easily the best team, winning all these stuff, also looking awesome in the game. Everyone, even fucking Twists was popping off in the Thunder pick. They're all looking awesome, but we all know it cannot last. And so it's like as the storyline happens, it's almost like it's falling away underneath it, like a rope bridge that you're running over, and it's just like a movie, and it's all falling apart right below the step behind us. Like, it makes the narratives feel so worthless, because on the one hand, like, I want to say this is the number one team, but in 5 minutes, there might not even be a team, and that's if they even just play as one player. If they actually just completely split up, this is so stupid as an era. It's fucking mental, mate.
I mean, they're poised to win CAC. Like, they just smashed. I mean, they won a close win against Mnmzzz, and Mnmzzz is probably the only other really good team there. I mean, I don't know if I don't know some, like, secret inside wisdom, but am I correct in saying that Twist is the only person who's, like, vaguely confirmed to be leaving?
As far as I know, yeah.
Do we think that is Twist a replaceable player, like, in theory, on paper?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, right? On this show, we always do. Like, I mean, there's a bunch of players you could probably put in that role, I think, yeah.
So my hope is that either A, they go with that roster in the game, sort of the game score empire, and Complexity finds, like, a good loving new home, or B, this roster leaves and finds a good loving new home and replace Twist. I mean, there's a world in which this could happen. We have heard multiple, you know, Valorant orgs, multiple orgs are interested in getting into CS now that now that we're in the winter and things are getting cheaper, I feel like GameScore could offload this quartet for relatively cheap, and it would poise the team to get into CS2. If I was TSM, I would just drop whatever the hell I'm doing right now and just get this roster. Like, I know that'd be awful. Like, Kerrigan and TSM together is like, it's just like an unholy abomination. You
never know. Maybe they do it again.
But just please, this FaZe roster, you're right. It is the #1 team in CS2 right now. If it keeps going for another 3 months and they stay alive, it could be the first era of CS2. I don't see there's any reason why Kerrigan can't pull that off. So you just have to hope, someone sees that and understands, oh, Kerrigan's really good, but so are the other 3 members that comprise the squad. This may be Kerrigan's last chance to have a great era. I should just sign the whole roster for like $1.8 million and call it a day.
I'm a bit different here. I think that this is like when you go on vacation and then you meet some baddie at like the hotel bar or something like that, and you somehow have great chemistry and things are going really well. It's great in the bedroom too. But you kind of know, like, after I leave, it's over. It's over, but I'm just going to enjoy it while it lasts. And that's what I'm kind of seeing with FaZe right now. Like, there's a finitude to every roster in existence, and it would be nice to know that there's something, like, there's a chance that this could be extended or whatever. But as it stands, like, the GameSquare deal hasn't been completed, which is why Complexity and FaZe are still allowed to compete in the same thing. And so, that's like the same, back to the analogy. It's like, my paths might cross with that woman once again in the future, and who knows if it does or doesn't. But with FaZe right now, they're playing great CS. It's definitely a bit bittersweet to know that this is probably only for a couple more months, or, end of Q1 is when they're going to want to finalize the deal. I'm just throwing out a date out there. But at the same time, I can still appreciate the Counter-Strike that they're playing, and this being in some ways the swan song for them. I wish it was a little bit more formalized so we knew and we could really sell that narrative to ourselves and recognize it and the greatness that that's at display here. But at the same time, I'm just going to take it in day by day and live in the moment as much as I can.
Listen, you may be able to quit that baddie and go on and live your life and be happy, but I can't quit this Kerrigan core. Like, I'm going to throw myself into coffin as it's being buried. Like, just pile the dirt on top of me. I refuse to leave. I've seen what could happen when Kerrigan and Rops get together. Like, I refuse to live in a world where Rops goes to, like, a random other IGL and, like, secondhand, like, Rops is like, I finally found the IGL who makes me not just a baiter and, a stat hunter. There is no future. Kerrigan can keep playing until he's like 45 years old. I don't give a shit. Like, if he has 4 great players beside him, who the fuck cares? Like, someone needs to save this team, and fuck it. It can be the Saudis. I don't give a shit. It can be the Russian oligarchs. I just, it's not principled, but I can't quit you, Kerrigan. So it's like.
Yeah, that's the problem. Maui also, notice within that, he forced you to accept his framing of what was happening. And so in his framing, he's just like always totally emotionally mature and never thinks what if about that baddie Mnmzzz. He's just like, there's so many baddies apparently on these like fictional trips that he just knows that he can get one at home and he can, no, what if actually that ends up being the one that haunts you though? And he always think, oh, but what if even in 6 months, what could that have been? And that's the problem, because here's the other issue here. It'd be one thing if FaZe was just like Ents, for example, where like maybe they can win an event, but they tend to come like second or third. Dude, they're winning events, and they've won quite a lot of events in the last 2 years. So the other thing is, the reason why it sucks is like if you're Twists, for example, ignore what I said earlier on. If it's possible to stay, you're gambling that you could ever be on a team as good as this again if you go on a Liquid. Like, if everything works out, maybe they could be as good as the team you're already on. And then also, because they win events, I just want to see them actually beaten in the game and then break up. Like, I'm fine with the lineup breaking up that way. It's just not when I actually know the only reason they're breaking up basically is the ownership of the team / maybe Twists wants to reunite with Liquid. Like, that's a whack reason. Like, if you're a historian, for like, why did like the greatest team of the end of CS:GO break up? Just like some other reason. Like, oh, so nothing in the game then. That's why it's ugly. That's why I put it in my ugly for this one.
Why did it die? A nuclear bomb. Like, because you're like, oh, it's time. At the end of like 2022, maybe start 2023, you're like, oh, maybe it's going to be time for Rain to go, quietly into the night, and then FaZe will pick someone else up, and then, the final duo of Kerrigan and Rain will be over, and we'll be able to be happy and peaceful. And then Rain just starts playing fucking amazing in CS2 again. You're like, God damn it! Like, because ultimately you're like, it shouldn't be over. I don't want it to be over, but it's over.